Hello once again and welcome to our complete course for the critical reasoning section of the GMAT exam. This is the third video of our complete course for the GMAT that will cover everything you need to know about the GMAT exam for you to get a 700 or more. So stay tuned. So the critical reasoning section is one of the most important sections. It involves logic, argumentation techniques, and a lot of other things. Okay, but before we get to the middle of the lesson, let's start with a little debriefing. Okay, this is important. The first thing I gotta say is, as I mentioned before, this is the third video of the whole series. So just make sure you first watch the other two. What are those other two? You first watch introduction. What is the GMAT exam? Okay, in there you'll see everything you need to know to comprehend the whole exam in general. Okay, but it's important for you to have a good comprehension, a good grasp of what this exam is about. If you don't, then you are not gonna possibly have the most efficient preparation. The second video is a sentence correction complete course. Okay, in there you'll see everything about sentence correction. Sentence correction involves, as you know, a lot of grammar, and that will help you when you start reading. So in order to have a good performance in reading, you need to know some grammar, and sentence correction will cover that. And guess what? Here in critical reasoning, we're going to be doing tons and tons of reading. Okay, not as much as in reading comprehension, which will come later, but you're going to be reading some passages, some extracts. So definitely you need to have those tips and tricks. So go and watch those two lessons first before continuing with this lesson. Now, the second part of the briefing, you need some practice material. Okay, I'll show you in this lesson a lot of things, a lot of questions, and I'm going to be analyzing them, but you need to apply them on your own. So, of course, how do you get practice material? Just go to the comments below and download our free PDF file with 100 free GMAT questions, also with video explanations for each of those questions, and you'll be all set. Okay, so just go there and don't forget to download your free PDF file. So now we've covered this, let's see the chapters of this lesson. So here we start with chapter number 1, which is introduction. Then we go to chapter number 2, which is strengthening and weakening question types. Chapter number 3, inference questions. Chapter number 4, assumption questions. And number 5, the boldface question. Okay, now something important, do not skip any of these chapters, because we have made it so that the easier topics, easier theories are at the beginning, and they are the most basic. So for example, if you skip the introduction, you're going to have problems solving any other type of questions efficiently. Okay, and also if you skip, for example, strengthening and weakening, chapter number 2, then you won't be able to be efficient at solving assumptions. So do not skip these chapters, just work step by step. All right, don't rush. So to know a little bit more about critical reasoning, remember the verbal section overall contains 36 questions. Almost 1/3 of them are going to be critical reasoning questions. So you can expect around 12 questions in the whole exam. You're going to get on average 2 minutes per question. But remember something though, 2 minutes on average, which means something. If you want to practice efficiently, you want to spend less time doing those or solving those easier exercises to give a little bit more time to the harder exercises. So what I'm saying is this: if you are taking 2 minutes to answer an easy question, then you are not doing it right. Okay, because those easier questions for critical reasoning should be answered in maybe 1.5 minutes at most. Okay, 2 minutes the intermediate ones, and maybe 2:30, 2:20 the hard ones. Okay, so because if you spend too much time doing the easier questions, once you get to the hard ones, imagine how long they're going to take. Now, and of course, something I've been saying a lot, if you've been following, if you've been doing your job, you already watch the other videos, I say this all the time. If you are practicing, when you practice, you're more efficient than at the time you're going to take the actual exam. When you take the actual exam, you sit there, and you're going to be more nervous, okay? So you're not going to perform as usual. When you practice, you allocate less time per question. So let's say you have an average on the actual exam of 2 minutes per critical reasoning question. When you practice, you have to do it at 1:50, 1:45. And that's how you guarantee that you won't have problems when you are taking the actual exam, okay? Now, if you're liking this video so far and you've watched our other videos and you like them as well, and you like our TOEFL course, which is, by the way, the most popular course on YouTube, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell to receive the latest updates. You can also follow us at our social media sites, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. We're going to be posting a lot of exclusive content there, so just watch out. Now, something I want to say also, you already know that we offer very inexpensive tutoring classes for the GMAT, right? Tutoring services for the GMAT for those of you who need help and want to get better at a specific section. Okay, so our contact information is here. You'll also find it in the description below. Just keep in mind though, right? Something has come to my attention. If you want to take classes with us, it's better that you make your reservations, that you schedule your classes at least 4 weeks in advance. I say this because some people have called us and say, you know, I want to take classes tomorrow. I need to take the GMAT in 3 days, for example. We can help you. Okay, there is no way for us to help you. We cannot make a space. We cannot kick out other students who've been waiting for weeks. So if you truly want to have classes with us, just make sure you get in touch with us at least 3 weeks in advance, and we'll make sure that you get the time you deserve. So now that the briefing is over, and let's go to the actual lesson. Okay, we're going to start with the first chapter, which is introduction. Remember, the introduction is probably the most important part. If you don't master the introduction, those topics, those concepts in the introduction, then critical reasoning will be very hard for you. So just pay close attention. Okay, so now we're going to start with the introduction for critical reasoning. We're going to lay out the foundations for this type of question of the verbal section. Okay, so this is what a critical reasoning question looks like. You have something that is called the argument. Most of the time, this is going to be called the argument. Okay, then you have a question. And finally, you get 5 answer choices, okay? Always in the GMAT, you always get 5 answer choices. You don't have to write anything. You don't have to, I mean, of course, in the verbal section, right? Because you do have to write something for the AWA section, the essay. But in the verbal section, you always get 5 options. So here you have your 5 options, your question and your argument. In my opinion, my main suggestion would be you should always start out by reading the question first, because in that way you're going to be able to select the theory that you're going to be applying for this question. Okay, now the question, there could be various questions, different types of questions. So some of them will ask you to strengthen something inside the argument. Some other ones will ask you to weaken something, the conclusion of the argument. Some others will ask you, for example, for the inference. Okay, so there are different types of questions. Different questions have different types of theories also. So you have to be able to first get acquainted with all the different theories, and number 2, be able to identify the question clearly. So whenever you read a question, you know what they're asking you, and you can select the theory accordingly. Okay, but this is what a critical reasoning exercise looks like. Now you get 2 minutes here to give your answer. Okay, now remember in sentence correction you had 1.5 minutes on average. Here for critical reasoning you get 2 minutes. Of course, you're very soon gonna find out while you practice, right, that this 2 minutes holds true for the average critical reasoning, which is the intermediate. Okay, intermediate. Now for those easy ones you should spend less time. Maybe 1.5 minutes is enough. And for the hard ones, they're going to have more text. They're going to have more words here. And also a harder, let's say a more complex vocabulary. So you're going to have to maybe allow a little bit more, maybe 2:15 to 20, okay, for those hard ones. So that's the timing for critical reasoning. Now, talking about the question types. We get several question types for critical reasonings. In this chart, you see the most common of them, okay? Now, we have categorized these types of questions in 3 columns. The first one has to do with strengthening and weakening. Number 2 has to do with inferences. Number 3, other types, okay? Now, if you notice, there are 5 question types that go inside the strengthening and weakening column. Why? Because even though these are different types of questions, all of them use the same theory, okay? All of them use the same theory, all of them have the same components. So basically, all of them will ask you to strengthen or to weaken an argument in different ways, okay? So inside this category for strengthening and weakening, you're gonna see the question about strengthening, right? Of course, then the question about weakening is almost the same thing, it's just the inverse, right? I mean, strengthening and weakening are 2 different sides of the same coin, but they have the same theory. Okay, whatever you do to strengthen, if you just invert it, the opposite would be to weaken. You see, most of the time they have a positive and negative relationship. Not always, but most of the time they do. Okay, and they use the same theory. Now, the question for assumptions, sometimes they're going to ask you for the assumption of the argument. It is very related to strengthening. Okay, because the assumption is a kind of strengthening with the main characteristic that it is necessary. We're going to be seeing that in this video more closely when we tackle assumptions. Okay, then the question that asks you to evaluate the argument also is the same thing as strengthening and weakening. It's just like the pre-thinking in order for you to strengthen and weaken. Kind of the assumption, but not giving the assumption something that is in the pre-thinking. Okay, and then explain the paradox is very similar to strengthen, just something that explains and make the whole argument logical. Okay, and then we go to the second column. We have the inferences. Now, inferences are a totally different animal. They're a different type of question. We use a different theory in order to solve an inference question than we use for strengthening and weakening. Okay. Now, in the inference category, we have the inferences on their own. We have the solution. Sometimes they're going to ask you for a solution for you to provide, and it's important for you to have a clear concept of the argument. So you have to have a clear understanding of what the argument is about and what the problem is about in order for you to provide a solution. Okay. Provide an example is kind of the same thing. You first have to read the argument. You have to understand it fully. And with that, you can provide an example, basically repeating it, but with an example. Because that's what an example does. It repeats information, basically, but just explains it a little better. And then summarizing, almost the same thing. So all of this, providing a solution, providing an example, summarizing something, because they kind of all of them give you a little summary of the argument, and maybe the solution just goes one step further, right? But all of them require a very good understanding of the argument and of the concepts that happen in there. They usually are solved by using the theory for inferences. Okay, because you're not trying to weaken or strengthen something that the author has said. You're just trying to repeat. Basically, let's say that if the GMAT asks you for an inference, it's like a teacher, like let's say you're in college, your teacher asking you to repeat or summarize what you've learned, kind of thing. Okay, not to come up with something to argue against or for it. Okay, and then you have other types of questions that are in this last column, and these types of questions are different. They are not about inferences, they are not about strengthening or weakening, they are just different. Now here we have the three main ones: the boldface, the dialogue, and mimic the reasoning. So these are the types of questions for critical reasoning that you're going to get in the verbal section of the GMAT. Okay, we're going to be seeing most of them in this lesson. Okay, the most important ones. So now let's go to this one: facts versus opinions. Okay, the main thing for you to be able to detect the argument, to identify what the argument is about, is to distinguish pretty clearly facts from opinions. So you have to be able to separate them clearly. Okay, so you have an argument, let's say. Most of those sentences you see inside the argument are going to be facts, and some of them, or maybe only one of them, is going to be an opinion. And it's very important for us to focus on the opinion, because the opinion usually is going to be the main conclusion. So you have to think that when the author is writing an argument, he or she is basically trying to convince you of something. They are going to try to sell you an idea, okay? And then in order for you to weaken or strengthen that idea, or just to repeat the information that has been stated, you have to understand what the idea is about. Okay, so here, a fact is a statement about something that has occurred. That's an important thing. A fact is just that, a fact. Something has happened. And something, of course, that something can be proven. You can give evidence in order to prove a fact. Okay? Most of the sentences in the argument will contain facts. And a fact cannot be contradicted. So you cannot say that a fact didn't happen. For example, facts will be this. Examples. It rained yesterday. If the author says it rained yesterday, you have to believe him, okay? Because most likely he or she is not really coming up with this, all right? They are just reporting on something that happened. So we cannot say, oh, the author is lying and it didn't rain yesterday. That wouldn't be a good argument, a good logic to follow in critical reasoning. So if there's a fact, if it doesn't look like the author is making this up or speculating about this, if it just looks like most of the times that the author is just reporting about something that has previously happened, then we cannot contradict this, okay? We have to take that at its face value. The same thing here. The Romans had one of the most powerful armies, okay? So if the author is just reporting on that, he's just mentioning that as common knowledge, then that's a fact. If that's a fact, then we cannot contradict it. The Book of the Dead is one of the oldest books. The same thing. If these are reports or facts, factual information of things that have happened in the past, then we have to take it as such. Okay, we cannot argue against them. So these are facts. Now we're going to talk about opinions. The opinions are the counterpart of the facts. Okay, so in an argument we have facts, and then we have opinions, right? Usually we only get one opinion, but there could be more, okay? It's very important for us because I mentioned this. In the argument, the author will give you evidence in order to support an opinion. So they will be trying to convince you of something. They will be trying to sell you an idea. That idea will be the opinion, which they will call main conclusion, okay? Main conclusion. So, normally that's the way arguments are written, and we have to understand what they want to convince us of. So, an opinion is a statement that cannot be proven. Opinions can be proven. They can be supported though. That is objective and for which the author will try to provide support. Of course, they will give support in order to bolster the opinion, okay? But it doesn't mean that the opinion was proven. It's just supported, okay? The main conclusion will be the most important opinion in the argument, okay? So when you only have one opinion inside the argument, that's going to be the main conclusion. So if you only have one opinion, that's equal to your main conclusion. Now, if you have more than one opinion, then you have to see which ones out of those 2 or 3 opinions is the most important. And the most important opinion will be the main conclusion, okay? You can't have 3 main conclusions. I mean, you only have one main conclusion, which is the most important opinion in the argument. So opinions will be things like this. Joe should buy a house, okay? That's like a suggestion, like a recommendation. That's an opinion, right? Should. I mean, can you prove it though? That he should buy a house. How can you prove that he should buy a house or he should do something? I mean, you could argue, you could give evidence in order to kind of convince people of that, but that cannot be proven. So that's an opinion, okay? In light of a new discovery, the theory needs to be reinterpreted. How can you prove that this needs to be reinterpreted? I mean, you can, of course, you can convince people of that, but that's not something that can be proven. The theory needs to be reinterpreted is an opinion. It is clear that people would be better off if they are all on welfare, okay? It is clear for whom? For the author, for whoever wrote this, right? But it's not clear to me, for example. So it's not something that can be proven. It's basically, it is clear to this person who is writing this that this is the best course of action. So basically, it is clear for this person, whoever is writing this, that this is the best course of action. Okay, but that's something that cannot be proven, like politics, like tastes, right? Like art. So this is very subjective. So those are things you cannot prove, the things that you can support. Okay, so these are opinions. So now, what we're going to do here is you're going to get 1 minute. We're not going to do this yet. I mean, you don't have to give me the answer right now. Okay, don't try to get the answer. I mean, if you could, that's fine. But the first thing you want to do in critical reasoning is to be able to identify facts and to know how to distinguish them from opinions. Okay? And so the main thing here would be try to do this, read this in 1 minute, and try to get the main conclusion. That's how you start, okay? Remember that right now we're seeing the most basic things for critical reasoning, and to be able to identify the main conclusion is by far the most basic thing. Don't rush it, okay? Don't try to skip this, because if you don't know how to identify main conclusions clearly, then you're gonna suffer big time later on, okay? So this is just critical reasoning 101 to identify main conclusions, and you have to be infallible. You cannot fail at identifying main conclusions. So you have 1 minute, and then I'm gonna give you the answer. Of course, so here the answer for the question that we just established, what the main conclusion is. The main conclusion is here at the end, right? Therefore, the new Jet 3000 will allow PG Airline to secure the financial stability it needs. That one's the main conclusion. Why? Because that's an opinion, right? Therefore, basically, that's a keyword for opinion, because they're giving you as a conclusion from all the evidence I have listed, from all the evidence I've presented, and then they say something in the future. So if they're saying something in the future, most likely they cannot prove it. Okay, you cannot prove something that will happen in the future. You can only support it. So that's a conclusion here. Everything else is a fact, right? Has several flights, that's something that happens, so that's a fact. PG Airline financial stability depends on, that's something in the present. That just looks like information. It doesn't look like the author is making that up, right? He's just reporting on something. And those are the only 2 sentences, actually. Here, it is planning to replace. So it is planning to replace sounds like something that's currently going on. So it's a fact, okay? So here we have 3 facts, and then at the end we have the main conclusion. Now, the main conclusion doesn't need to be at the end. Sometimes it could be at the beginning, okay? But most of the time it will be at the end of the argument. So here we're gonna see some tips and tricks in order to identify facts and opinions really quickly, okay? So there are some keywords for facts. If you are watching this lesson, I expect that you already watched the lesson for sentence correction. So you know there are some words called subordinators, right? So those words have different meaning, but some subordinators have the meaning of explanation, right? And these are words like because, like as, like since, okay? So whenever you start a clause or a sentence with one of these words, then that's a fact. It cannot be. That subordinate clause cannot be an opinion. Okay, if I say it is called because it is snowing a lot. Because it is snowing a lot. That's the subordinated clause that is being subordinated with because, right? So that subordinated clause is a fact. Okay, so if you start with because, any clause that starts with because as is becomes a fact immediately. So that's very easy for us. It is called could be an opinion, yeah, but because it is snowing a lot, this part here, this subordinated clause, is a fact. Now, whatever is in the past tense most of the time will be a fact, right? Especially if that's something that already happened, okay? The team lost yesterday. So this looks like it's just information. Most likely the author is reporting on it. So that's just a fact. They lost. There's nothing we can do about that, right? Because it's something that happened, okay? Now, you got to be careful, though, with sometimes the author might try to speculate something that may have happened in the past. So if something may have happened in the past, that could be an opinion, okay? But most of the time, something is just in the past tense. Without may have lost, that's a different thing, right? Without could have lost. Okay, if the author states something in the past, 99% of the time, that's going to be a fact. okay? That's going to be a fact also. Now, we also have some keywords for opinions, okay? Some modal verbs like should, like must, okay? Because they give you opinions, right? Peter should kill the bad guys. Should kill. That's a recommendation. That's subjective, okay? The government must pay for something, okay? Must pay for something, so must. How can we prove that they must do something? That cannot be proven, okay? So those are just opinions. Number 2, interpretations. Whatever is an interpretation is an opinion, all right? It doesn't matter if it isn't being interpreted by a scientist or somebody who knows their craft. Still, any interpretation is an opinion. For example, the evidence indicates that the saber-tooth ate grapes. Okay, we have this subordinate clause that the saber-tooth ate grapes. That's some information that they are telling me that is being supported by the evidence. But now, is this 100% guaranteed that the saber-tooth ate grapes? It's something that really happened, or it's something that it's possibly happened, maybe, right? So in this case, it is something that possibly happened. Why? Because this information right here is being supported by the evidence, but it doesn't have to be necessarily true. You see? So whatever gets supported and cannot be proven becomes an opinion. So this interpretation, this one here, is basically an opinion. It cannot be a fact because we don't know whether it happened or not. What we know is that it's very possible that it happened. That's what we know. Okay, but it's still an opinion, not a fact. Here there are other keywords for opinions. For example, some resolution keywords. These are very important. Therefore, hence, consequently, thus, and in conclusion. So whenever you have a clause after one of these resolution keywords, more than likely you're going to be in front of an opinion. Therefore, Pinocchio was a good boy. All right, Pinocchio was a good boy. So, therefore, it's basically that probably they already gave you information before, right? So you're concluding something here. That conclusion is an opinion, right? A conclusion is the same. I mean, for us here in critical reasoning, is going to be a word that is exchangeable for the word opinion. So they are going to be used. Both of them are going to be used interchangeably. Something that's an inference also, right? It is clear, it is evident. We saw this before in the example, right? It is clear for whom? It is clear for the person who's writing the argument, for the author, but it doesn't have to be true, you see? So it is clear that Seinfeld is better than Friends. Okay, for this person who's writing this sentence, that's clear, but it's not necessarily true. It is their opinion, okay? So those are big indications that you have an opinion. When you have resolution keywords and when you have inference keywords such as it is clear or it is evident. Perfect, so now we're going to do a little problem set. We're going to do 2 problem sets. This is the first one, okay? So I'll give you 30 seconds, only 30 seconds to identify whether these statements, one by one, is an opinion or it's a fact, okay? So let's go. 3, 2, 1. Let's start. Okay, so now you should be done, right? But before that, don't forget to follow us in our social media sites, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, because we're releasing a lot of quality and exclusive content in those sites. So just make sure you follow us there. So here we start with number 1. Goku should have never sacrificed himself. Okay, is this an opinion or a fact? That's an opinion, right? Should have never. So that cannot be proven. Whether somebody should or should not cannot be proven. Number 2, the first Avengers movie came out in 2012. What's that? That's a fact. Why? Because something that happened, right? I'm not here arguing something. I'm just stating or reporting on something that happened before, okay? Something that can be proven. Number 3, The recent war indicates that people don't know how to get along together. What is that, a fact or an opinion? Of course, that's an opinion. Indicates that. So you say that you have a war, right? That war is a fact, but then that's indicating something. So this one's an interpretation by the person. Whoever wrote this, the author, is interpreting from the war that people don't know how to get along together. That doesn't necessarily have to be true. So that's an opinion. Number 4, Iron Man was a better character than Thor. That's of course an opinion. What's the better character? Why? Because you cannot prove that A is better than B. You can prove that A is faster than B. Yes. You can prove that A is taller than B. Yes. But you cannot prove that one is better than the other. Because better in terms of what? How are you going to measure who's better than the other one? So that's an opinion. Number 5. The Godfather would have been successful even if it wasn't so heavily promoted. What do you think about that? Opinion, of course, would have been successful. How do you know? How do you know that's something real? That's something that would have happened? There's no way for us to know, right? So even though that's in the past, it's a conditional, so we don't know if it would have happened. But this person believes that it would have happened. But so that's an opinion, not a fact. Okay, now let's go to problem set number 2. So this is the second problem set. It goes from question 6 to exercise 10. You're going to get 30 seconds to do this, so let's start right now. Okay, it should be done by this time. Number 6. Therefore, the flu is caused by an unknown virus. What is that? It looks like an opinion. Why? Because it has a keyword, therefore. So basically, they're saying, based in other evidence, I can interpret this thing. We can conclude that this thing happens. But something that's being supported, it's not something that is real necessarily. Okay? So number 6 is an opinion. Number 7, the flooding was caused by the rain. This looks like a fact. I mean, if you have, for example, therefore the flooding was caused by the rain, that would look like an opinion, but in this case, you don't have any keywords. It just looks like a sentence, a fact, something that has happened. It's in the past, so it looks like a fact. Okay? Number 8. Harry Potter is a wizard who doesn't know how to keep quiet. That looks like a fact also. Why? Because they are describing Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter is something. Okay? This person could be mistaken, maybe, but it's a fact. Okay? It looks like a fact. Now, it's important for me to go over something here. We don't really care whether the author, or we don't need to assess whether some of the facts given by the author may be inaccurate or not. Okay, that's not part of our job. The thing is, we have to assess whether whatever the author is saying looks like a fact or looks like something that he is interpreting, but not like something that is a consensus, right? Number 8, because of the way it is being written, it doesn't look like the author is doing an effort of interpreting something there. It just looks like he is reporting on that. He is describing something. Maybe he just got this description from the book. Maybe he just got it from Wikipedia, or maybe he just got it somewhere else. But it doesn't look like he is coming up with this description. Okay? Now, if there are other keywords that indicate that this guy, this writer, is coming up with this description, then that would be an opinion. Okay? But in this case, there are no keywords, so that looks like a fact. Number 9, Spidey knows that his friends are fake. Okay, that looks also like a fact. Okay, because the author is giving it without any sort of hesitation. It's basically writing this sentence without any sort of doubt. He uses the verb knows, right? He knows, and there is no other keyword to kind of indicate us that this author has interpreted this concept from other evidence. Okay, it would have been different again if the author had. It is clear that Spidey knows that would have been a different thing, because then the author would be revealing that actually he's coming up with this concept. Okay, but the way things are now in number 9, there are no keywords for opinions, so it looks like a fact. Number 10, the Beatles is a better band than the Stones. Okay, the Beatles is a better band than the Stones. Of course, that's an opinion. Why? Because of the word better. The author is judging. And like in the last problem set, we also have one with better. When we have comparisons, that could be a fact if there is a way for you to measure the levels. Here we don't know, there is no way for us to know if one is better than the other. We don't know, we're not told about better at what. Okay, so in this case, that's just too general, too broad, something that cannot be proven. So number 10 is an opinion. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, so now we're done with the problem sets and we're done with this brief introduction. Okay, now remember, don't try to rush things. The first thing you want to do in critical reasoning, and I see this over and over with the students, sometimes they don't know how to find the main conclusion, and that's because it is not clear for them the difference between a fact and an opinion. Okay, and that's something very basic. So you should make sure you have absolutely no problems in this department. Okay, now let's move forward to the next lesson. Okay, so you just finished the introduction for critical reasoning. This introduction is very important. Okay, again, the concepts, the difference between claims, which are opinions, right? Opinions and facts. Another name for a fact is a premise. Okay, premises and claims, facts and opinions, the same thing. But the difference between those two has to be very, very clear from now on. If you make mistakes identifying the main conclusion, the main opinion, then those are considered easy mistakes. If you still make those kind of mistakes, carry those types of mistakes later in the course, then you're going to notice you won't be able to solve any question efficiently. So just make sure you've gotten this lesson down. Okay, now let's move on to the next lesson, which is strengthening and weakening. Okay, perfect. So now here we have chapter number 2, strengthening and weakening, or strengthening and weakening. Okay, as we already mentioned in the introduction, these are the most common types of questions you're going to find in critical reasoning. Okay, those are 2 different types of questions. One is the one that is going to ask you to strengthen the conclusion, and the other one is the one that is going to ask you to weaken the conclusion. Okay, but basically there are 2 sides of the same coin. So you are going to use the same type of theory in order to comply or answer these questions. Okay, so now the most important thing here is to be able to identify the question. So when you read the question, you should be able to know that they're asking you about a strengthening or a weakening question. So some common synonyms that are going to be used for strengthening are support, soundness, to bolster something, evidence, or reason for. Those are some common words that you're going to find instead of strengthening that are going to ask you also to strengthen the conclusion. Okay, and then you have the synonyms of weakening. Weakening, the same thing as criticism, undermine, flaw, evidence against, or reason against. Okay, so just make sure that you know these types of words, because the terminology in critical reasoning tends to be a little bit difficult. But remember this, when you have your argument, then you have your question, right? Just by reading the question, you should be able to identify what type of question that is. If it's a strengthening, if it's a weakening, if it's an assumption, etc. Just by reading the question, that's the most important thing. Don't rush here, because if you don't know what they're asking you clearly and fast, then you're going to have trouble solving a critical reasoning question. Okay, so that's why you have to train for, to be able to identify the question as soon as possible. Then we have this one. So there are going to be some exercises in which you don't get a question. All you're going to get is a blank. This one's a blank, okay? But then if you notice that the words that are leading to this blank are subordinators, like since, because, as, those are explanation keywords, right? Then that's a strengthening question. So whenever you see a blank and you see one of these keywords next to the blank, they are asking you to strengthen the main conclusion of the argument, or which is the same thing as saying the main conclusion of the author. Okay, so by this time you should already be acquainted with identifying conclusions and with identifying question types for strengthening and weakening. Perfect. So how we're gonna do this? This lesson is gonna be very hands-on. We're gonna learn logical arguments based on exercises. Okay, so we're gonna get to the first exercise. You're gonna get 2 minutes. Remember, for each critical reasoning exercise, you get 2 minutes on average. So you're gonna get 2 minutes to come up with your answer, and then I'm gonna help you to analyze more carefully and more in detail this exercise. Okay, so here you have the first one. You get 2 minutes, starting right now. Perfect. So now it's over. You should already have your answer. Let's read the question first. Asbestos contains several toxins known to cause cancer in humans and animals. Because asbestos presents such a high health risk, laws must be passed in order to regulate the use of asbestos in the construction industry. Okay, the question, of course, was something that provides the most support for the argument. So remember, read the question first. So this one's a strengthen question, and they're asking you to strengthen the main conclusion. The main conclusion should be easy for you to get it. Is laws must be passed in order to do what? To regulate. This one is a very straightforward argument. This one is an easy question. Okay, how do you know this is an easy question? Because there's very little text. I mean, the story is very short, and basically you only get 2 sentences, and it's very direct. The conclusion is very obvious. Laws must be passed. Why? To regulate asbestos. Why? Because asbestos contains several toxins. Okay, very easy, very simple, very reduced type of argument. Now, something that tells me that asbestos and its toxins are dangerous. We already know they're dangerous, so we don't want to keep on repeating they're dangerous, but they give us one type of danger. They say this asbestos causes cancer. Okay, so cause cancer. Not only that they cause cancer, now we have to add some other sort of information. Maybe it causes the worst type of cancer possible. Maybe besides causing cancer, it also causes something else. We just want to keep saying bad things about asbestos, right? Because if we are going to strengthen the regulation, if we're going to argue for the regulation, we want to say that asbestos is very dangerous. So we just want to keep on adding things Okay, we already know it causes cancer, but if we give any sort of new information regarding cancer or regarding any other drawbacks that the use of asbestos may present. Okay, so now let's see the first one. The amount of toxins contained in asbestos is much less than the amount of toxins found in everyday plastic products. It's very easy for us to eliminate this, all right? This one's wrong. Why? Because if anything, they're whitewashing asbestos, right? They are saying that asbestos contains less toxins than other plastic products. So basically, they're saying asbestos is not as bad, okay? And that's not what we want here. What we want is we want to say that asbestos is bad. Asbestos is dangerous. We don't want to whitewash asbestos. So letter A is not doing a good job. Letter A, in fact, I think it's weakening. Okay, it's weakening. It's the other way around. It's basically saying something good about asbestos. Number 2, or letter B. In the jurisdiction covered by the proposed legislation, cellulose is used instead of asbestos in virtually all applications. Okay, this one weakens also. That's not what we want. Why? Because they're saying asbestos is very seldomly used, scarcely used. Almost nobody uses asbestos. Most people use cellulose. Okay, so if asbestos is such a minimum or a minimal, so if asbestos is such a minimal threat, why would you want to pass, or why would you need to pass legislation or laws, right? So that kind of tells you, you know what, laws might not be needed. Why? Because at the end of the day, even though asbestos is very dangerous, I mean, you almost don't get any asbestos in the city because people use other products or other substitutes. Okay, so that would leave the law without too much of a purpose. Okay, that would defeat the purpose. So that's not good enough. Now, letter C. Thermoplastic is much more toxic than that's also very easy for us to eliminate. Why? The same thing as A. They're whitewashing asbestos by saying that there is something that is even worse. So just in reference to thermoplastic, asbestos looks like a good product, right? It doesn't look that bad. Letter D. People who reside near asbestos-plagued buildings are not interested in the proposed legislation. This one is a little bit of a weekend and a little bit of out of scope, okay? Out of scope means that it doesn't really strengthen or weaken. I mean, it's outside of the argument. It doesn't answer the question. Why? Because basically, we don't care if people are interested or not. When you pass laws, it's not only for the interest of the residents, right? Now, but also because even if we assume that in order to pass a law, it is important for the people to be interested in the law, that doesn't help the law, right? Because if people are not interested, they are not likely to accept the laws that are going to be imposed. And we want to say that the laws are good, that we need to prohibit or we need to regulate asbestos. So that's not good. That's saying something bad about the law. And of course, letter E is our answer. Cities with a high proportion of structures built with asbestos have the highest cancer rates in the country. So you are saying something in the light of the cancer. You are not only saying that it causes cancer, but it causes more cancer than other cities. I mean, if you have asbestos, that's correlated with a higher incidence of cancer. It's not only the causing of cancer, it's also the likelihood of getting cancer, which wasn't really stated. Likelihood wasn't stated in the actual argument. So you're giving a new premise, a new piece of information in order to say that yes, asbestos is dangerous. This one is a very easy exercise actually, right? Because that's the only one, letter E, that says something negative about asbestos, okay? So this one is kind of an example of the easiest type of critical reasoning question. So this one would be a very easy exercise on the GMAT. Now let's go to the next one. All right, so here the question is about weakening, right? Which of the following is true? Most seriously weakens the argument above. Okay, what is the argument about? Submarine fiber optic cables are necessary to optimally connect countries in different continents to the internet. Okay, even if only a minor part of the cable is damaged, the whole cable's ability to transfer data is lost. And because these cables are deep under the sea, expert scuba divers are needed to repair them. Therefore, scuba divers must continue to be deployed. Okay, so basically here we have to be careful with the extreme word. Extreme word in the conclusion, right? What are extreme words? Extreme words are things like never, like always, like must, okay, must, all, none. Okay, whenever you see one of these words in the conclusion, you have to pay very close attention. So here we have scuba divers must continue to be deployed. This is a conclusion. Okay, so basically with must, they're saying that's the only way. There's no other way. That's the only way in which you can solve something, right? Scuba divers must continue to be deployed. Why? Because scuba divers are needed to repair them. So it is necessary for you to repair them. There's not another way in which you can connect these countries to the internet. So we want to weaken that. By weakening, we're going to say that there is another way, that we don't need to send scuba divers over to repair these cables. Maybe we have other options. Maybe we can repair them. The pre-thinking would be, okay, so they tell me I must send scuba divers, and I want to weaken that, so I want to say, okay, I don't need to send scuba divers. Option number one would be, we can repair the cables in some other way, right? Different way. The other one would be, we don't need to repair the cables, no need to repair them. Maybe there are other options besides cables, or there are other ways to lay out cables, okay? So those would be the two things we have in the pre-thinking before we even analyze the answer choices. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Cables that remain broken for a long time rot and emit toxic pollutants that affect the ocean's wildlife. Okay, why do we care about the ocean's wildlife? I mean, do we care about that, the wildlife? No, right? Well, I mean, yeah, it's important, but according to the argument, that's not part of the conclusion. Well, the conclusion doesn't care. It's not environmentally focused. Okay, it's not environmentally oriented. So yeah, I mean, this one seems like a bad thing, that it's gonna emit pollutants, but that's not, according to the argument, that's not important for us. We don't care about damaging the environment. We care about connecting the countries. So this is out of scope. That's not part of the argument. The argument is not focused on the environmental drawbacks or the environmental effects, collateral damage you might create from this. Letter B. Even though internet fiber optic cables are necessary to connect most countries, people all over the world have access to wireless internet from satellites. That seems attractive. That seems good. Why? Because you'd say, all right, you have another option. So it's not only the cables, right? But you also have the satellites. So even if you don't have the cables, you might have the satellites, and that should be good enough for people to be connected. But then we have to be very careful here, very careful with the premises, right? Premises are basically the facts, right? The facts we saw before. There are tons of facts here. We cannot contradict a fact. Now remember, here let's read the first fact. What is the first fact? Submarine fiber optic cables are necessary to optimally connect countries in different continents. They are necessary. So that's not up for discussion. We cannot say, no, they're not necessary. There is another way in which we can do this. We have the satellites. That should be good enough. No. Why? Because they already told us these cables are necessary for the continents or countries in different continents to be connected. Okay? So letter B is not good enough. Why? Because it goes, our assumption here, letter B, goes against the premise, because we'll be saying, okay, cables are not necessary and satellites should do good enough. Okay, they should do good enough. And that's not the case, because the first sentence goes against it. Cables are necessary. There is no question about it. Letter C. The government is looking to cut its budget for the maintenance of undersea internet cables. Okay, they're looking to cut their budget. Now, why does it matter? Because when they say scuba divers must continue, they're not saying it would be good if scuba divers go and fix them, or it's going to be expensive, or it's going to be cheap to send the scuba divers. Money is an issue here, yes, but it's not that much of an issue. I mean, it's not whether it's too expensive or not. It's whether you can truly find another solution in order to repair the cables, or in order to do something with the cables, but to be able to wire these countries in different continents up. Okay, you have to be able to connect them. That's the thing. In letter C, they are not talking anything about the connection. So that's out. So letter D. Now, because of technical requirements repairing undersea cables, replacing the whole cable from one end to the other is less expensive. Okay, that one's their answer. Why? Because they tell you there is another option. Okay, you wanted to repair the cables. You want to repair them. But here you can just lay out new cables, and that's much more efficient, right? So that's my option. And here we still get the cables, right? Because that's important. We have to have the cables. Why? Because of the first sentence. The cables are important for a good connection between these countries. So, but there's another way for you to get the cable. You don't need to repair it. What you need to do is just to lay out a new set of cables and you'll be good. So that was our answer here. Because we don't need to continue to deploy scuba divers. Letter E. Undersea cable repairment requires several cubic feet of oxygen, making it a very expensive undertaking. Okay, the cost. Good, but the cost is not, it's important, but not that important here. What we care about is whether we have another option. Because even if it's expensive, if repairing were the only option, then we have to assume the cost. We just have to pay for the thing. Okay, that's the thing. So, but in this case, if we have another option, then we can decide to go with the other option, and in that case, this math would be wrong. You see? So that's why letter D is the answer here. Pretty simple. This one is an intermediate question for the GMAT. Now let's go to the third one. Okay, again, you're gonna get 2 minutes to do this. So 3, 2, 1, let's go. All right, so let's read the question. Which of the following is true most seriously weakens? So this one's a weakening question, the argument above. Now, let's read the argument. You have a comic book guy. The comic book guy says, the number of comic books sold last year was less than it had been in the previous years. The biggest comic writers last year were more interested in writing scripts for films, and subsequently wrote comics with less quality and originality. Therefore, it is likely that the decrease in sales was due to the poorer plots in comic books. So this is what we call a cause-effect type of argument. So this comic book guy is saying that decrease in sales was because, so that's the effect, right? Decrease in sales was caused by poorer plots in comic books. Poorer plots. The plots have lower quality, basically. And why? Because he gives a premise. Last year, most writers were more interested in writing scripts for films and didn't put too much effort into writing comic books. Okay, that's his argument. So we want to weaken that. We want to say that the decrease in plots did not cause a decrease in sales. Maybe there was another cause, an alternate cause, or maybe there's something else that shows us that these two things, the decrease in the quality of the plot and the decrease in sales, are not correlated. Okay, so the first one, not every plot written by a major comic book writer was accepted for release during last year. Does that break the correlation here? Not every plot? No, right? Why would it break the correlation? It doesn't say anything about sales to start with, just talks about the plot, and it doesn't qualify the plot whether we're talking about a quality plot or a plot with a lesser quality, so that's not our answer. Let's go to B. The average time it takes for a major comic book writer to write a complete story for a comic book has decreased in the past 10 years. And now, okay, but that doesn't really correlate with quality, right? So the time has decreased, okay. But is it because they have become more efficient? Or is it just because they're writing poorer plots? It's not clear from B, right? So the quality has gone down or the efficiency has gone up. We don't know. Letter B doesn't tell us, so that's not good enough either. Letter C. The major comic book publishers had the same revenue from the sale of comics this year as last year. Okay, so in this case, revenue from the comic book publishers. Or does it matter whether, does it let us analyze, let us assess the relationship between the decrease in the quality of plots and a decrease in sales? No, right? What does the revenue from the publishers have to do with this? So that's not our answer. Letter D, writing stories for films is not the only side job comic book writers usually have. Okay, so they have other side jobs too. Okay, but does that, okay, they might have 10 side jobs, who knows? Let's say they have 10 side jobs. Okay, here the conclusion is not that it is because they are writing scripts for movies that the sales have decreased. That's not the conclusion. The conclusion is a relationship, a correlation between the decrease in the quality of the plot and a decrease in sales. And letter D doesn't say anything about the decrease in the quality of the plot or the sales. So that's not good. It's not analyzing the correlation between the cause and the effect. Letter E, environmental advocates launched a campaign last year against all printed books and magazines. That's directly affecting the sales. So that's our answer. Why? Because it's telling me there's a different cause, an alternate cause for the decrease in sales. Maybe it is not caused by the decrease in the quality of the plot. Maybe it is because of this boycott that is going on by these environmental advocates, right? You have the environmental advocates and they are launching a campaign against, they're boycotting basically all printed books and magazines, which of course comic books fall into this category. So it might be because of this boycott that the sales have decreased, and actually it has nothing to do with the plot or with the decrease in the quality of the plots. Okay, so that's what we call an alternate cause. Pretty simple, right? So that's our cause effect. All right, so here we have question number 4 for strengthening and weakening. So do it. You already know that you have 2 minutes. And then we're going to go over the answer. Okay, so now this one is a flow question. They're asking you for the flow, okay? Now, what is a flow? Basically, it's kind of a weakening, but it's got a different spin to it, okay? Because they are not asking you to provide an evidence or a fact, a premise that weakens the argument, that weakens the main conclusion. They don't want you to weaken it in that sense. What they want you to do is to identify the flaw in reasoning. What mistake is the author making in this argument? So it's a little different. They don't want you to provide new information that would destroy the argument. They want you just to point out what mistake was made in this argument. So let's read the argument. According to a recent market study, adults aged 30 to 50 are actually more likely to purchase toys and are more likely to purchase them in larger quantities than are members of any other demographic group. Hence, the commonly held belief that kids and teens play more with toys is mistaken. Okay, so first what they're saying is adults are the ones buying more toys. Okay, adults between the ages of 30 to 50. Okay, and then they say this would support the theory, the belief that actually kids and teens are not the ones playing more with toys because adults buy more. So because adults buy more toys, then adults play with toys more than kids and teens do. You see? So that's the logic here. Now, what flaw, what mistake can we see in this logic? Let's see. The first one, the argument is mainly flawed because the author doesn't supply information of adults in age groups other than between 30 to 50. Okay, is that a problem? So does the author, in order to make his conclusion valid, does the author have to provide more support of adults? No, because we don't have to go and see all group ages. The author is taking a sample, a very representative sample of adults between 30 to 50. Right? That's like the middle age of adults. And that should be enough So the problem is not that. The problem is really here, how is the author making the link between these two, between buying and playing? Because the author is kind of making an equation of that. He's equaling buying to playing, but is that necessarily so? Anybody who buys something will use it. So if you buy a toy, you have to use it, you have to play with it, or maybe you can buy it as a gift. I don't know. So letter A is not the answer. Letter B. The argument fails to distinguish between purchasing and usage. That's what we've been talking about, right? The author hasn't really distinguished between these two, and he hasn't really provided any support in order to say that buying is equal to playing. So that's our answer. Letter C. Attacks the commonly held belief rather than a proven statistical study. No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with attacking or with criticizing or with trying to weaken a commonly held belief. So the author is actually doing okay trying to weaken a belief, because a belief is a claim is an opinion. So he's trying to weaken an opinion, and that's fine, totally fine. So that's not a problem. Okay, now letter D. The argument fails to specify the actual quantity of toys purchased by both demographic groups mentioned. Now, is it necessary for the author to indicate the exact number, the exact quantity of toys that are being bought? Not really. Why would we need to have the exact number? It's not a matter of number. Just by saying that one group buys more than the other one, that's a good enough fact. That's a fact, and that will help the author to substantiate, to improve, to support his claim. So that wasn't a problem. Letter E. The argument talks about a demographic group without specifying which members might be included in it. I don't think that's a problem, right? Because actually he said demographic group of adults between the ages of 30 to 50. So that, I think that's fine, right? What more information would be helpful? What, their hair color, their marital status? No, I don't think so, right? So that doesn't matter. Just by knowing that they're adults, it's good enough. So that's out. Answer B. This one, by the way, is an easy question. Okay, now we're going to go to the next one, number 5. Okay, so again, you get 2 minutes to get your answer. By the way, remember to follow us in our different social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you don't, I'm being very serious now. If you don't, you're missing on a lot of stuff. What stuff? Amazing exclusive content for different international exams, such as the GMAT, the TOEFL, the GRE. And by the way, it's on these sites that we also publish our promotions, our big discounts for any prep programs. So if you're looking for big discounts in GMAT prep programs with the best tutors in the world, then it's better for you to follow us in our social media sites for you to access our big discounts. Okay, so you get 2 minutes here, only two, and then we're gonna go over the answer and explanation. Let's go. Okay, perfect. So now, time's up. This question is definitely a strengthening question. Strengthen. Okay, they're asking you to strengthen this thing here, which is the conclusion, right? The decision they made to postpone the campaign. They want you to give the best reason. They want you to identify one reason why this would make sense. You have to support this decision to postpone the campaign. So let's read the whole story. Stark Industries, the biggest nanotechnology firm in the world, is currently developing a new bioengineering technology called the skin screen. Okay, that's a weird and sexy name, right? Which would allow users to turn part of their skin in their bodies into a screen display. Okay, this technology is more efficient and advanced than any other similar technology developed by competing firms. Even though the research conducted by Stark Industries' marketing department has shown that profits will be maximized if the advertisement campaign for the skin screen starts now, Tony Stark, the company's CEO, has decided to start the advertisement campaign in 12 months. So Tony Stark doesn't want to do it right now. He says, let's wait. Okay, now is not the time. We're going to have to wait a full year. Now, you want to support Tony Stark in this case. You want to say that he had a reason to do this. A reason that would benefit his own company. Okay? So, let's see. The first one. Some buyers might be hesitant to purchase a product that changes part of their body. Okay, is that going to be solved in 12 months? So right now they might be hesitant. In 12 months they're going to be hesitant. Who knows, right? I mean, if they're hesitant now, why wouldn't they be hesitant in 12 months? What's going to happen within these 12 months that is going to make them believe otherwise? Or that is going to make them trust this new tech? They don't tell us. They don't give us a reason. So that's not a reason, okay? Now, you want to provide a reason why waiting 12 months is important, is beneficial for the company. Number 2, Stark's main rival company is developing a similar technology, but is still in the intermediate stages. Okay. Now, so if you already have the technology and the other competing firm is already working on the development for a product that is similar, wouldn't you want to release your product as soon as possible? You would, right? So in this case, I think this one's a weekend. That one is saying, basically, this is suggesting that the postponement of the campaign is wrong, right? Because there are incentives for the company, for Stark Industries, to release the product to the market right now. So that's not the answer. That's the opposite of what we want. Let us see. Advertising the technology right now would hurt Stark's lines of similar products, including their line of clothing with screens. Now, this one seems okay. This one's the answer. Why? Because if you advertise now, you're gonna, of course, you're gonna have revenues from the sales of the skin screen. Again, that's a sexy name, right? Skin screen. But then you're gonna lose revenues from your line of clothing with screens. So once you release this new product, that's going to substitute the other product that you're also selling, which is clothing with screens, right? That right now is hot, that right now is selling good. So you don't want to interrupt the sales, all right, of that product. So that would be a reason why you would need to wait 12 months. That's good. Letter D, Stark has yet to get permits to implement his new technology in some smaller countries. Okay, this one seems fine, right? Because it's saying that you're waiting because you don't have all the permits. What's the matter though? That they say in some smaller countries. So of course, as any other company, right, Stark Industries should be focused basically on the main market. And the main market is most of the countries, right? Not the smaller ones, but the biggest ones. So if instead of smaller, this one's the biggest, then that would be fine because they wouldn't be able to release the product right now, so they would need to wait. But as they are only saying here, they're only saying smaller countries, then that's not good enough. Okay, so that's not the answer. And the last one, researchers would be encouraged to ask for higher wages as soon as the skin screen hits the market. Okay, but I mean, why wait in 12 months, right? That's going to happen now or in 12 months anyway. So if the researchers want to ask for a higher wage, for a higher pay, then you're just postponing the payment, but in reality it's going to happen either way, you see? So that's not the answer. There you go. See here, this one's an intermediate question. Now let's go and let's evaluate, let's analyze one more question. So here, number 6, you get 2 minutes to work this out, and once you're finished, you have to finish in 2 minutes, okay? That you have to build a habit. After 2 minutes, I'm going to come here, I'm going to save you by giving you the explanation and the right answer. Okay, so now let's see. This was a weakening question, right? Which of them, if true, best weakens the argument? So it's a very straightforward question. Now we care about the story and, of course, about the main conclusion. Let's read the whole story. CEO of bus company, he's saying something. He says, our buses have so few riders that we are barely making a profit. Okay, unfortunately, we cannot raise fare prices because of the risk that passengers will switch to other forms of transportation. On the other hand, the cost of operating our large buses is the same whether they're empty or at their full capacity. Evidently, thus, to increase profits, we must get more passengers to ride the bus. And so that last sentence here, evidently, thus, evidently is like it is clear, right? So that's a main conclusion. That's his opinion, that they must increase profits they must get more passengers in the buses to increase profits. Now, I want you to focus on this word, must. We went over this type of words in one of the previous exercises. Just to refresh your memory, we mentioned that these types of words were called extreme words. Okay, extreme words. Basically, words like all, never, only, nothing, and also the word must. Must is basically saying that's the only, you're going to remember, right? Only way. So the only way for you to increase profits is by getting more passengers to ride the buses. Okay. Now, how can we weaken that? Very easily. We can say that that's not the only way, that there is another way, another option for us to increase the profits. Okay. So that one which tells us that there is another way to increase profits will be the answer here. Okay, let's check the first one. It is possible to transform the buses to make them smaller, decreasing their total operating cost. Okay, so whenever you have the word profits, you immediately have to think about this. Profit is equal to what? Revenues minus costs, right? Costs, you have a lot of factors in costs, right? Operating costs, you have variable costs, fixed costs, etc. And then you have the revenues. Revenues are price times quantity, okay? Now, here, if you check letter A, they say there is a way that you can do something to the buses. You can adjust them, right? You can transform them. You can convert them into something else. And you will decrease the costs. So if you have less costs, what happens to the profits? It will go up, of course. So is that another way to increase your profits? Yes, that's another way to increase your profits. So getting more passengers wasn't the only way. So that will weaken your answer, your main conclusion. Okay, so that's the answer here, letter A. What about the second one? The bus company is located in a geographical area where there are more passengers in summer than in winter. Okay, this is out of scope because we don't care about this difference between summer and winter. Plus, we don't know if the CEO of this company is talking about the summer or the winter or both, right? So we don't know in which season we are right now. So that's out. Let us see, the company's capacity rate per bus, though low, has been stable during the last 5 years. Okay, that doesn't weaken the conclusion, right? Because we want to evaluate whether really we must get more passengers in order to increase our profits. This says nothing about the profits nor about the plan to increase the profits. So that's out. Letter D, the bus company has never tried to increase bus fares before. Okay, they've never tried it, and but that's not the conclusion. That is out of scope also, out of scope. Here we have to focus on this part. Evidently, to increase profits, we must get more passengers. The main conclusion is our everything. Okay, that's the only thing we care about. The nexus between the premises and the main conclusion. We want to attack. When they say weaken the argument, they say weaken the main conclusion from the argument. Weaken the opinion made by the author. So this one's out. Letter D, regular passengers are not likely to switch to other forms of transportation in the near future. Okay, they are not likely to switch. But that one, that goes against the premise, and that's not good. We mentioned that facts, right, against a fact. Facts are facts. We cannot contradict facts. One of the facts tells us we cannot raise fare prices. Okay, so that's it. I mean, they can't raise fare prices. Okay, that's it. There's nothing we can do about that. And this one kind of insinuates, kind of suggests that they could raise the prices. And that's not good because that's going against a fact. That's the difference between facts and opinions. Okay, we saw that in the introduction of critical reasoning, right? So you better have that down right, fully, okay? So this one's been strengthening and weakening. As you see, there are different types of argumentation types, different types of logic that are employed in these questions. Just get used to them, okay? Because you're going to be seeing them a lot. Strengthening and weakening is by far the most important part of critical reasoning because it's going to make the bulk of all the questions you get in the exam for this part of the verbal section, okay? So you better pay close attention here and practice a lot. By the way, you should have already downloaded our free PDF with 100 free GMAT exercises called Liberty Challenge Volume 1. If you haven't done so, then you're missing on a lot of practice material. So just go to the link below to the description and you're going to find a link to our free PDF. And then you're going to get a lot of questions to practice with. And of course, you're going to need to practice with several questions in order to get this down. The practice material is very important, okay? But we got you covered. We already have this PDF in there with video explanations also, by the way. So, but first, before just doing the exercises, you have to get your theory down. So you have to watch this video completely. Once you watch this video completely, you get your theory, then you go and practice. Not the other way around, okay? You never start practicing and then studying theory. You have to go step by step. You first get the theory, then little by little you start building your own foundations and then you start practicing. Okay, so just go download the file, but don't do it just yet. First finish this video, get all your theory down, and then go and solve that file. Okay, that's a challenge. That's why we called it Liberty Challenge Volume 1. Perfect, so we just finished the lesson for strengthening and weakening. Okay, that's a very important lesson. Why? Because as I mentioned, I kind of suggested it in the lesson, but this is the most common question type, strengthening and weakening. So out of the 12 questions, right, that I mentioned that you are going to get around 12 questions you're going to get in the whole exam for critical reasoning, maybe half of them are going to be strengthening and weakening. Okay, so you need to master this theory because this is the most common type of question, and if you master it, of course, you're going to maximize your chances of getting a high score. Okay, there is no way you're going to do good in this section of the GMAT if you don't master strengthening and weakening. Okay, so pay close attention. Now we're going to start the next chapter, but before that, I invite you to follow us in our different social media sites: Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course subscribe to the channel to make sure you receive our latest content. And now let's start with chapter number 3, Inferences. Alright, so now we're going to start with Inferences, chapter number 3, but before we continue, just don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell to receive our latest updates. Okay, by the way, also follow us in our social media: Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Otherwise, you're going to be missing on several important videos for you to get the score that you want on different exams: the GMAT, the GRE, the TOEFL, and the IELTS. So now let's start with inferences. Inferences is a very important topic. Okay, why? Because of two reasons. First of all, because as we've mentioned before, the inference has a totally different theory than strengthening and weakening. Right? Strengthening and weakening has one type of theory. We've already gone over the plan goal. We've already gone over to provide an advantage or disadvantage, to focus on the main conclusion, etc. Right? The assumptions that we're going to see later, the assumption question type is also based on strengthening and weakening. Okay? And so are some other ones. But the inference is different. It doesn't follow any of the other theory we've been seeing other than introduction. Of course, introduction still helpful for us because we need to know what is a fact and to be able to distinguish it clearly from an opinion. Okay. Now, the second reason why the inference is also important is because the theory that we see here in inferences for critical reasoning will be the same theory that you will apply for inferences question types in reading comprehension. Okay, reading comp. So if you master inferences in critical reasoning, that's going to help you big time with the inference questions from reading comprehension. And believe me, those are the hardest questions when you are doing reading comprehension, and most people have problems with them. So it pays off to get this theory down. Okay, so now let's start. What is an inference? Inference is another word for deduction, right? For deduction. So we mentioned before also that inference in the GMAT, on the GMAT, will be a synonym for words such as conclusion or an opinion. Okay, so basically when they ask you for an inference, you have to know this. They're going to give you a set of data. All of them are going to be facts. You are not going to get an opinion here on the argument. You are going to have to provide a deduction based on this data, something that must be true. So you read all the information from this set of facts, from the given statements, and then you infer something that must be necessarily true based on these statements. Okay, which one has to be true, and then you choose your answer. There are two main mistakes people make. First of all, you shouldn't make any wild assumptions. Wild assumptions are not allowed. So you have to base your answer on this data without making any assumptions. So you have to take very literally what the author is mentioning. Okay, you are not allowed to assume, to kind of fill in the blanks, to kind of assume any other type of premise. Okay, and no external information is accepted. So basically, when you are deducing something, you're inferring something from this set of facts, you are not allowed to introduce external information or information that you know. For example, if they're talking about economics, okay, and you know something about economics because let's say you're an economist, okay, you cannot use your own knowledge to supplement for the answer here, okay. You just have to be based on these facts. This whole thing, this whole argument constitutes your whole word, okay. You shouldn't use any other information other than that. So now let's go and let's see some types of common inferences. The first one is the combination, okay. What is a combination? Basically, they're gonna give you several sentences, several facts in the argument. Let's say you have 6 sentences. So if you combine some of them, then you're gonna get some inferences. For example, number 1, Joe is a man. All men are mortal. Okay, so Joe is a man. Joe equals to man. Man equal to mortal combat, right? And then if we combine, we know that we see that we have man in both of them, right? Singular and plural, but we have the same word, man. So if we combine both, treat them as if they were equations, right? A equals to B, B equals to C. Therefore, A is equals to C. Therefore, Joe is mortal, you see? So you are joining 2 sentences in there. So that's the most basic, the most common type of inference. Okay, usually easy questions and some intermediate ones are gonna be combinations. Number 2, Spider-Man is a superhero. There are no superheroes without superpowers. Okay, so you have Spider-Man, he's a superhero. So Spider-Man is equal to superhero. There are no superheroes without superpowers. So basically, that's the same thing as saying all superheroes have superpowers. Superpowers. So, Spider-Man being a superhero, all superheroes have superpowers. So, Spider-Man must have some superpowers. You see? So, that's a combination. Okay? These are pretty simple. Of course, once you get into a real argument here, a critical reasoning argument, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. Because in these examples, we only have 2 sentences. So, it's very clear how you're going to combine, how you're going to get your combination. But when you are dealing with longer arguments, you might have, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. So you can have multiple combinations. So you have to be paying close attention to all the possibilities you have in there. So now we start with our practice for combinations. We have 2 minutes to solve this question, and then I'm going to explain the answer to you. So let's start right now. Okay, time's up. Let's read this. This is an inference, right? Which of the following must be true? That's a signal that they're asking you for the inference. Now, the more the supply of a certain product, the lower the price in the market. So the more supply you have, that's equal to lower price in the market. When a price for a product is low, people tend to question its quality and might be deterred from buying that specific product. So if the price is low, people will question the quality. So perception from the public goes down. People believe that that product doesn't have the optimal quality. Therefore, it stands to reason that if the price for a new LED TV released by Somic goes down, people might believe that Somic's new LED TV is of low quality. Okay, so we have this relationship here. The more the supply of a product, the lower the price, and the lower the perception of quality of that product. Okay, so now let's see what we can find as an answer. Letter A, some rival companies will decrease their supply to give their products an image of higher prestige. So they say some of the companies will lower the supply looking for the opposite effect, right? That the price goes up and also you have a higher perception. Now, do we know that's going to happen? I mean, this might seem reasonable. Yes, definitely it's reasonable. We might imagine that some companies might be tempted to do that. That seems reasonable. That seems like a good business move. But that's not what the inference is about, right? It's not about what is reasonable. It's about what is true. Is it necessarily true? Do we know that other companies are going to do this? Are we sure that they're going to do this? No. So yes, you have two options available, right? One option is that companies do it. They decrease their supply. And the other option is that they don't. Both are possible. So in this case, this is not necessarily true. Okay, that's something that seems reasonable, but it's not something that is necessarily true based on the information here. They never told us what other companies or competing companies, rival companies would do. So we have no information on them, on how they're going to behave. Number 2, more buyers will buy the rival company's LED TV than the new Somic TV. Now they're talking about the number of buyers, more buyers, the quantity. Do we have information on the quantity of the buyers? No info on the quantity. Let us see, if the supply for the new Somic LED TV increases, the product's perceived quality in the market might suffer. Okay, that seems like, yes, it seems like they're combining two things, right? The supply goes up and the perception goes down. So that's a possibility. Yes, it's definitely a possibility. The product's perceived quality, this thing, might suffer, it might go down. So they are combining these two things. Okay, they're using the price as the pivot. So it's A equal to B and B is equal to C, and then your answer is A is equal to C. So letter C is the answer here. Letter D, the perceived quality of complement goods of the new Somic LED TV will also suffer if the supply of the latest is increased. Now, they are talking about complement goods. Complement goods are things that go along the TV, right? I don't know, maybe some sort of a DVD player or something like that. Now, how do we know they are going to suffer? I mean, now if you know some economic theory, you know that whenever the perception of the product, the sales of the product go down, the main product, in this case the TV, the sales of the complements might also go down because that's one of the factors. But here we are using external information. We are not supposed to know that information from economic theory. So basing our answer only on whatever has been written here by the author, we cannot know anything about the complement goods. So that's not an answer. That's something that might seem reasonable if you apply external information, but not from the argument. Okay, so that's the important thing. Do not apply external information here. Letter E, the perceived quality of a product will only suffer after an increase in supply in the case of tech products. So basically they're saying this only works, this is only true, this whole relationship for tech products. How do we know? How do we know it doesn't apply to other types of products? They never said that it's only for tech products, right? They gave us an example about a tech product, yeah, which is a TV. A TV qualifies as a tech product, but they never said that it's limited to tech products. So that's out. And you answer C. Okay, so that's how you answer these inferences. This one was an easy question, by the way. Now let's go to the next question, number 12. Again, you have 2 minutes to do this, and then I'm gonna walk you through the answer. 3, 2, 1, let's go right now. Okay, this one is an intermediate question. Okay, now, which of the following could be inferred? Of course, that's an inference. They're asking you for the inference. Let's read this argument. With the goal of preserving public property, state law prohibits anyone from sleeping in public parks. In the state's main park, there are several distinct groups of people who spend a lot of time there. Some of them sit on the grass and sing songs, like hippies, while others play around and do sports. Most of these people are between the ages of 15 and 25 and go to the park exclusively to relax. Peter, who frequents the park, has the utmost respect for the laws involved in the park's preservation, security, and maintenance. Okay, so that's been the argument. Now, what can we infer from here? So we've got several sentences. We have actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. Okay, 5 sentences, and we can combine any of them. So we can combine information, the first one with the second one, first one with third one, first one with fifth one, etc. All right, so there are tons of combinations possible. Now, number 1, the state loses money when people sleep in public parks. Is that necessarily true, that they lose money? They say with the goal of preserving public property. Okay, it kind of seems logic. If you're preserving public property, it's because that public property is going to be affected in some way, but we don't know if it's going to be affected in such a way that it's going to cost you money. Maybe the image of the park is going to be affected, but no, I mean, it's not like the people who are sleeping there are breaking something, right? Are breaking something physical. So we cannot, because of the information here, we cannot say that they are losing money. We know that they are being affected in some way. Yes, the preservation is being affected, but not necessarily in monetary terms. Okay, this one's close, but not quite, because it requires a little assumption. It requires that this preservation is only for physical things. They're trying to preserve the fountains, the grass, the things that cost, but they might be trying to preserve the image. or they might be trying to preserve other things that don't have a monetary value. Okay, so that one's close, but not quite. That's not the answer. Number two, people who sing songs in the park do not comply with the state law as much as people who play sports. Okay, you have as much as, so you have a comparison here. And you're comparing two groups of people that were stated here, right? People who sing songs, all right, the singers, these hippies, with the people who play sports in the park. Okay, you have two different groups. Now, have we been given, this is a question, right? Have we been given the compliance rate for each of the groups? Do we know how much the first group complies and what's the rate for the second group? No. If we don't have the rates of their compliance, we cannot choose this answer. We can't compare things we don't know. We have to have values in order to compare. So that's not the answer, okay? Letter C. Most people believe that the state laws regarding park maintenance and security are important. Now, notice they're using a quantity word here. Quantity word. The word most. Most is a strong word. It's not an extreme word, but it's a strong word nonetheless. Most is equal to over 50%. So they're saying over 50% of people believe this. Is it necessary? I mean, is it true? I mean, are we sure that over 50% of people believe that? Have we been told that most people believe that it's important? We don't know. We know that Peter does, but Peter is only one person, right? We don't know if it's most people. So most is wrong. Letter D. Most people, again most, who sleep in the park are within the ages of 15 and 25. All right. Now, the important thing is this. We know that most people that go to the park are between the ages of 15 and 25. We don't know what's the age for the people that sleep in the park. So we have people who go to the park. We assume most of them are 15 to 25. Some of them are not, so they might be older or younger. Okay, so less of them are within other age groups, but we don't know what's the ratio of sleeping in the park. It might be that only 1% of this first group between 15 and 25 sleep in the park, and then 90% of the other group sleeps in the park. So it might be different. We don't know if there's a correlation between the age group and not sleeping in the park. So that's not our answer. Okay. Letter E. Although he's a frequent visitor to the park, Peter doesn't sleep there. Yes. Why? This might seem a little complicated, but they are. What they're doing here is they are combining sentence number 1 with sentence number 5. Sentence number 1 says, with the goal of preserving public property, the state law prohibits anyone from sleeping in public parks. So, as part of the preservation of the park, there is a prohibition. That prohibition is for sleeping there, right? Sleeping is prohibited. Okay, and then they tell you, Peter has the utmost respect. He complies with laws involved in the park preservation, with the preservation. So as one of the laws for the park preservation is not sleeping in the park, a prohibition to sleep in the park, Peter has respect and complies with that prohibition. So he doesn't sleep in the park. So letter E here. You see? So that's how inferences are built. That's how inferences are basically analyzed. Okay? So now we're going to go to a different theory. But there's another type to analyze and solve inferences. So here we come to the deductions. Right? Inferences as a deduction. We already saw the inference as a combination. Now we're going to see inferences as deductions. Deductions tend to be more difficult than the combinations, all right? So usually they're going to be presented to you in intermediate and hard questions. Now, what are deductions? Deductions could be based on several different things. For example, they could be based on conditions. Let's read this one. If you go outside, you need to wear a raincoat. Okay, if you go outside. So if you go outside, if this is true, then you need this. Now, what happens if this is not true? What happens if the condition is not present? If you don't go outside, you might not need to wear a raincoat. You see, so this is a deduction. From this cause-effect conditional relationship, we can deduce something. Right? If A is true, then B is true. If A is not true, then B might not be true. So that's a sort of a deduction. Okay, that's going to be applied here when you're doing inferences, especially when you are dealing with the harder questions. Number 2, most MBA applicants are between 25 and 29 years old. So they give you an age group and they use the quantity word most. So a deduction can also be based on a quantity word. Now, if they said most is, as we've mentioned before, over 50%, but less than 100. Why? Because if it would have been 100, they would have said all, right? It wouldn't make sense to say most. So between 50% and 100 are between the ages of 25 and 29. So just by analyzing this most, you can deduce that not all, actually this is wrong, not all MBA applicants are between 25 and 29 years old. You see? Not all of them. Why? Because they said most. If they said most, is that it's not 100%. So you can deduce that just because of that quantity word. So not all MBA applicants are between the ages of 25 and 29. Okay, that's how you do these inferences as deductions. So there are tons of deductions. You could also rely on some other things, but we're gonna analyze them right now. So let's start with this number 12. Again, you have 2 minutes to do this, and then we're going to go over the answer together. So take your 2 minutes. Okay, so the question reads, if the statements above are true, all the statements above are true. So basically they're giving you a hint that everything here is a fact, right? If all the statements above are true, which of the following assertions, assertion is a keyword for conclusion, which is another keyword for inference, can be made on the basis of them. So this one is an inference question, right? If everything above is a fact, what can you infer? What has to be true based on these facts? Let's read the argument. When the result of a drug test is neither positive nor negative, but inconclusive, it is not possible to tell whether the examinee has traces of a certain drug in his or her system. Instead, such result indicates that the sample has been contaminated in the laboratory during the rendering process. Nonetheless, employers often refuse to hire an applicant because of an inconclusive drug test result. Okay, so that's what they are saying, right? So you have a story about that inconclusive test. You have the word instead, you have the word nonetheless, all right? So those are important keywords for us to notice. What has to be true? Let's see. The first one, most examinees with inconclusive test results are not frequent drug users, okay? Over 50% of these people who get inconclusive test results are not drug users. How do we know? Can we tell that from here? Is it true? We don't even know who gets an inconclusive test result. I mean, I think that's random, right? It has nothing to do with whether you're a drug user or not. So for us to say, for this answer to say most, that's an overstatement. We don't know, actually. We don't know the quantity, so we cannot say that it's over 50%. That's out. Number 2, drug tests are discriminatory and should be banned. Okay. Now, does the author give his opinion here? Because here they're saying should be banned. How do we know they should be banned? Is it true that they should be banned? That seems like an opinion. Can an opinion be true? No, right? And the author is not really giving his opinion in order for us to say that the author believes that this drug test should be banned, right? How can we prove? How can we say that it is true that they should be banned? Impossible for us to say that. So that's how. Let us see. An inconclusive drug test can sometimes be unfairly held against a job applicant. Unfair is basically when they make any decision that is not based on evidence and that doesn't really treat you according to reality. Okay, does that happen here? Yes. And here you also have can sometimes, because they say employers often, sometimes, refuse to hire an applicant because of an inconclusive drug test. Employers often is sometimes, right? Refuse to hire an applicant because of an inconclusive drug test result. So, but basically they're saying, they mentioned before that an inconclusive test result indicates that it is not possible to tell whether the examinee has traces of a drug. So if you have an inconclusive test result, basically it is impossible to know. Can't know whether you take drugs or not. Okay? But the employers will refuse to hire you if you have an inconclusive test result. So for those people, of course, we here can safely infer that some people who get an inconclusive test result are not drug users, and some other ones are, maybe, right? But for those who are not drug users, they will also be refused by the employers. So for them, this inconclusive test result is being held in an unfair way, because even though they don't do drugs, they won't be able to get the job because employers will just distrust this result. So that's why letter C makes sense. Okay, they are being judged not based on their reality. Letter D, a positive drug test can sometimes be mistaken. Now they talk up here about the positive result. Do we have any information about that in this passage? No. They've never mentioned anything about the positive test result. Of course, we know if we apply external information that all these tests have a margin of error, right? And of course, some of the positive ones might be mistaken. No test is perfect, but that's external information. So if we use external information, we would say D is correct. But remember what we've been saying in the inference theory, we cannot apply external information. All we know, in order for us to answer, is this argument. Everything the author has written. That's what we care about. We cannot introduce information on top of that. So D is not the answer. Letter E, employers have become distrustful of drug tests. Is it real? I mean, is it necessary? We don't know. We know that they refuse to hire somebody who doesn't, or who has an inconclusive drug test, but we don't know what's the relationship between employers and drug tests. It might do that they trust them, but just because of they're pragmatic, they tend to refuse when they see a conclusive drug test, but not that they distrust them. Distrustful is it's too much of a strong word in that case. We don't know if they really distrust all drug tests. Okay, we might say, maybe we would have said, employers have become distrustful of an inconclusive drug test result. That could have been better. That might have been an answer. But we have no grounds, no info to say that they distrust the drug test in general. So that's out, and letter C is your answer. Okay? This one was an easy one. Now let's move to the next one. Okay, again, you have 2 minutes to finish this, and then we're going to go over the answer together. So 3, 2, 1, let's start. Okay, so now let's see. Let's read the question first. The statements above are true. Which of the following assertions can be made on the basis of them? The same question as before, right? So statements above are true. So basically everything above is a fact. And what assertion, what inference can you make based on them? So you have to say something that is true based on these statements here. Now let's read the statements. The environmentalist is the one talking, doing all the talk. Industrialists would have you believe that an increase in the rate at which trees are being cut down suggests that trees are not endangered. This is a specious argument, as misleading as stating that the increase in the rate at which buffaloes were being hunted 5 decades ago indicated that this species was not endangered. Of course, we know that 3 decades ago, buffaloes became extinct. Actually, the real cause for the increase in the rate of deforestation is the introduction of the new methods implemented in the real estate industry to do away with forests, such as forest fires. Okay, so that's a very strong argument. So that's an argument. But of course, in order for us to deduce something, we're going to take all of this as if they were facts. Okay? So, what has to be true here? Number 1, technology is one reason why people are prone to destroy nature. Okay, they're prone to destroy nature. Is technology a reason? What have we been told about technology? We know that technology is the reason why, in this case, this real estate industry is being more efficient at deforestation. But this letter is too general, saying that all people are prone to destroy nature. And number 2, we don't know if technology is the cause, the reason, because the reason is the same thing as the cause, right? We know that technology is a tool. That's what we've been told here in the statement. Not that it is a reason or a cause. So that one's out. The word reason is wrong, and the word people in general, that's too broad. Okay, that's too broad, because people in general are not the ones doing deforestation, are not the ones cutting trees down, right? It's the real estate industry in this case. So that's out. Number 2, trees had never been deforested as much as in the last decade. Is it true or not? Do we have a historical information about the deforestation of trees? No. How can we know that this is the period in which trees have been deforested the most? We cannot tell. So that's out. Let's see. The proportion of buffaloes that were hunted 5 decades ago is similar to the proportion of trees that are currently being cut down. Now, when they make a comparison here in the statements between the buffalo hunting, right, and the deforestation of trees, they don't say that it's similar because of the number, right? They are not trying to compare the number. They're trying to compare or make an analogy about the statement that an increase, let's say an increase in deforestation was because of the same reasons and as the increase of hunting, in the hunting of buffaloes. Not that the number of buffaloes getting killed and trees being cut down is the same. Basically, we're trying to compare the reasons for the increase, but not the numbers of increase. So that's out also. Those are out. Letter D. Trees are an endangered species regardless of what industrialists say. Is that true? Let's see the whole argument. He says, the environmentalist says, industrialists would have you believe that an increase in the rate at which trees are being cut down means that they are not endangered. So the industrialists want you to believe that an increase in the rate of deforestation is equal to the trees not being endangered. Okay. This is a specious argument, and it's misleading. What does misleading mean? Misleading means something that is not true. It's fake. It's false. It's a phony. Okay. As stated, so this argument is not true. Okay, it's specious and misleading. Okay. Actually, there are other causes. So by the author, the environmentalist, saying that this argument is not true, what does it mean? That increasing deforestation actually does not show that trees are not endangered. So the trees are endangered, even though the industrialists would say something else. So letter D is the answer. Okay, because the author is directly saying that this argument by the industrialist is not true. Letter E. Modern technologies are not as efficient as the ones used 5 decades ago. Again, we don't have historical data for the efficiency of technology. We don't. We assume that, of course, right now the technology is better, but that's an assumption. That's something that we are using with our external information. Okay? If we don't add any information, there is no way for us to know letter E, so that's out. And there you have your answer, letter D. So this one's actually a hardish type of question. Okay, it's kind of hard. So that's how you solve these inferences. Now it's time for us to go to one last section for inferences: extreme words. What are extreme words? Extreme words are words such as these ones, right? All, no, any, no, always, never, nothing, everyone. Words that are absolute. So whenever you see a word that is absolute, the rule is this for inferences. If you see extreme words in your statements, then most likely you're going to have to choose an answer that also contains extreme word. However, if you don't see an extreme word in your statements, then most likely your answer should not have extreme word. Okay? Example: Mike is sad because people in his class have forgotten about the tournament. And then we say something like deduction: everyone in Mike's class has forgotten about the tournament. That's not true. Okay, this is a wrong deduction. Why? Because the statement says Mike is sad because people have forgotten. It doesn't say that all people have forgotten. It might be that, I don't know, out of 10 people, 3 forgot, or most of them, let's say 8 forgot. But it doesn't have to be all of them. So here in letter E, I'm sorry, in letter, well, not letter, but the answer, they are assuming that it's everyone. They are adding extreme words when the argument or the statement originally didn't contain extreme words. Okay, so this extreme word is not good. That's wrong. Okay, so now let's practice this one here. You have 2 minutes to do this, and then we're gonna go over the answer. I hope you're enjoying this. Okay, I know you're enjoying this. I know you have already subscribed to the channel, and that you also follow us in our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Okay, if you don't, shame on you. Really, shame on you. Now let's go here to this critical reasoning. Just do it. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, let's read the question first. If the statements above are true, which of the following assertions can be made on the basis of them? So the same question for assertion. Assertion is a keyword for inference, and the statements above are true means that all of them are facts. Okay. Error. This error results from a physical problem in the ability of a computer's RAM to wipe out old cache files. Okay. Particularly those containing temporary scripts and saved data. The computer's defense mechanism attacks these stranded cache files as though they were harmful malware, often resulting in serious damage to the integrity of the computer's operating system. This is a tough argument, right? Because it has to do with computers and things like that. Computers that frequently suffer from this error must have their cache files cleaned manually. Common diagnoses for this problem include malware scanner check and disk repair tools. And common symptoms range from perpetual lagging to constant system freeze. Okay, so they told you you have this problem with the computers, right? It's the inability to wipe out your cache files. And the reason why, right, the mechanism kind of gets confused and believes that these are harmful malware and attacks it and damages the operating system. And then they tell you that what's the solution? You have to clean it manually. And then that the common diagnosis, right, to have a scan, and some repair tools, and then also the common symptoms. Okay, tons of info in there. This one seems like a tricky question. Now, first one, let's see if that's true. Any computer that freezes frequently has error, blah, blah. So What did they say about the freeze? They mentioned that the freeze here, let me erase all these things. The freeze here is one symptom. So you have the error here, error 0010 XX, and then they say one of the symptoms is the freeze. Okay, now does it mean that every computer that has this error must freeze? I mean, so if you don't have the symptom, you don't have the error? Is it like that with symptoms? What is a symptom? Let's say if you have, let's say you have the COVID. One of the symptoms is an upset stomach. But if you don't have an upset stomach, that means you don't have the COVID. Is that easy? No, right? Because a symptom is not something that you necessarily have to experience. Okay? You might experience one of the symptoms or not. So you have a list of symptoms. You'll experience maybe most of them, but you don't have to experience all of those symptoms. Okay, so this any here is too strong. It says that all computers that freeze have this error, and that's not true. Now, let's say the other way around, right? If you have a computer that freezes, does it mean that it has error 0010 XX? Not necessarily, because that's a symptom. It doesn't mean that this symptom is exclusive of this condition. The same thing, if anyone who has an upset stomach has the COVID, no, right? Because this is a symptom, but it's not exclusive. So you might have just an indigestion or something like that, right? So the same way here, if the computer freezes, that's one symptom of this error, but it doesn't constitute the error. So freezing is not telling you that you necessarily have it. I mean, you might have that error, but it's not a proof that you have that error, that your computer has that error. So letter A is out because it's got a wrong logic. Okay. Now, number 2, cleaning cache files manually will fix this error in computers that have. Okay. What did they mention about cleaning these files manually? Right, they say computers that frequently suffer from this error must have their cache files cleaned manually. Okay. They say must have them, but must have them in order to fix it? Is it fixing the error? We don't know, right? It could fix it maybe, or just it will make it work. It will make it not freeze up, right? But if you kind of, it's kind of helping the computer to be useful, right? But it doesn't mean that it's fixing the error. So the word fix is not justified here. We don't know if we are fixing it by just cleaning the cache files manually. We know that we are making it work, but not fixing it, because fixing it means that it won't have that error again. And this seems more like a maintenance rather than fixing something. So that's out. B is out. C, malware scanners and these repair tools are the only way to diagnose this error in a computer. Are they the only way? Let's see where they mention or where they talked about these malware scanners and these disk repair tools. They mentioned them here, right? A common diagnosis for this problem include malware scanner and disk repair tools, all right? They say common diagnosis. So common things you use to diagnose the situation are these two. But does it mean that those are the only ones? No, those are the most common, not the only ones. So that's out. Okay, this only is wrong. Extreme word. They are placing extreme word in a place where it shouldn't be. It's not justified because in the actual statements they didn't use extreme word. Letter D. Temporary scripts are more harmful to a computer than saved data files. Where did they talk about these temporary scripts and saved data files? They actually mentioned them in the first sentence, right? This error results from a problem in the ability of this RAM to clean cache files, particularly those containing temporary scripts and saved data. Now, they are making a comparison here. If we are to compare, we have to know the degree of danger, the degree of harm from these two individual things, right? From the temporary scripts and the saved data files. And here, from the first sentence, which is the only place where they mention or they talk about temporary scripts and saved data files, they don't give you any degree or any way to see the level of harm inflicted by any of them. You see? So that's an impossible comparison for us to make. We cannot compare them because we don't know the values. Last one. Computers can always recognize harmless files and react appropriately to them. Yes. Why? That's the answer. Why? What do you think? Because they say the computer's defense mechanism, attacks these stranded cache files as though they were harmful. What does it mean? As though they were harmful. As though is a keyword for something that is hypothetical, usually indicating that something is false, unreal, right? Which means by saying that as though they were harmful, it means that in reality, they are not harmful. But the mechanism reacts as though they were harmful. You see? So the problem is that the computer gets confused and believes that these files are harmful. So computers can always recognize harmless files. Yes, that's true. And react properly. And they don't react properly, right? Because they are attacking these files as though they were harmful. So letter E here, based on this keyword for something that is hypothetical, as though. Okay, so that's the way you answer these inferences. Inferences, the theory for inferences is very helpful because of the things we mentioned before, and also because it's going to help you with reading comprehension. Okay, so you better get this down very, very clearly. And now we're going to be going to the next chapter. So we just finished inferences. Okay, that's a lesson for inferences. Inferences are tricky. They're a little difficult. Okay, why are they difficult? Because people usually they try to implement external information, and that's not the way you're supposed to solve these questions. Okay, so remember, when you're solving an inference, everything that has been given to you in the facts, in the premises, in the argument, that's the only thing you're supposed to know. We don't know anything else. Okay, so based only on that information, only on that one, you are gonna give your answer. Okay, now let's move on to the next chapter, which is a more complex chapter than the ones before, assumptions. Nice, so now we're starting a different chapter, chapter number 4, assumptions. Okay, assumptions can get a little tricky. Assumptions are usually not easy questions. Most of the assumptions you're going to see on the GMAT are either intermediate or difficult. Okay, why? Because the assumptions, and this is one of the most important things you have to understand, they are built on the foundations of the theory for strengthening and weakening. Okay, so if you understand how to strengthen, how to weaken really good, then assumptions could be easier for you. Okay, then you're not going to have any trouble with assumptions. Okay, but you first have to understand the mechanics of strengthening and weakening, because the assumption in reality, let's read the definition. It's a bridge between what? It connects the facts that you have in your argument to the main conclusion, the opinion given by the author. Okay, that's what the assumption does. It's a bridge, it's a connection, a link between those two things. Now let's read the definition. An assumption is a bridge between the premises, which means facts, right? Premises are facts, and the conclusion of the argument. It has the following characteristics. Two main characteristics here. Number 1, it is necessary. This is the most important characteristic. In reality, and here also number 2, it supports the conclusion. So in reality, the assumption is one subtype of a strengthening question. So inside the word of strengthening, you have the assumption. So now, what's the difference between any assumption and most common strengthening answers? The difference is that the assumption not only strengthens the argument, but is necessary. So the necessity, right? It's necessary. Now, what does it mean for it to be necessary? That if you say that the assumption is not true, the whole thing, the whole argument just crumbles. It falls down, okay? The whole thing falls. So that's the assumption. The assumption is very important. The assumption is something, it's a piece of information that is unstated. So it hasn't been mentioned by the author, but must be true in order for the whole argument to be true. If the assumption is not true, then that argument doesn't hold. That's the thing, okay? Now let's see and let's apply that concept here. All superheroes have superpowers. Therefore, Spidey must have some superpowers. Okay, so they are not saying something that's connecting. They say, all right, all superheroes have superpowers, and because of that, therefore, Spidey must have some superpowers. But does it have to be true? I mean, what would need to be true in order for this to work? So this one is like an equation, right? Superheroes, heroes equal to superpowers. Spidey equal to superpowers. Okay, what are they assuming there? They haven't said it, they haven't mentioned this, but they're assuming something, that superhero is equal to Spidey. Right? Spidey is a superhero. They haven't said it, but they have assumed it. Hero. Okay. Now, what would happen if I say, let's say as a weakening, right? I say Spidey here. Spidey is not a superhero. Then this whole conclusion, that whole argument is wrong, you see? So the assumption is that Spidey is a superhero. That needs to be true. It hasn't been mentioned by the author, but it has been assumed by the author in order for the author to provide this conclusion. Now, if I say that the assumption isn't true, if I go there and try to break the assumption, I negate it, I invert it to Spidey is not a superhero, then that conclusion would suffer, okay? That's the assumption. Basically is a piece of information that's unstated and that is necessary for the conclusion to work. And how are you going to, let's say, prove that something is an assumption? Then what you do very easily is you negate the assumption, you invert it, and if that assumption, when it has been negated, destroys the argument, then you are safe because that's the right assumption, okay? So that's what the assumption is. It's important for you first to understand the whole thing about strengthening and weakening, because otherwise you're going to get lost. Okay, the assumption is not a basic type of question. It's not the place you should start. You should start with strengthening and weakening and just work your way from there. So now let's see some examples here, some exercises. As usual, you're going to have 2 minutes to finish these exercises. Okay, so you get 2 minutes, and then we are going to analyze this together. All right, so 3, 2, 1, let's start. Okay, so here we have this argument. Let's read it together. Although Marvel movies are often considered childish flicks, they are in fact thoughtful and profound films, since they present philosophical themes such as utilitarianism in modern-day society, the deontology of warfare, and virtual ethics in solving complex problems. Okay, a lot of things, or a lot of philosophical kind of weird things. Okay. So the question is, the conclusion above is properly drawn if which of the following is assumed. So basically, which of the following must be true in order for this conclusion to be properly inferred, to be properly deduced, right? So what must be true in order for the conclusion to work? So here you have 5 things, okay? Now, how we're gonna do this? Let's see. What is the conclusion here? The conclusion would be they are in fact thoughtful and profound films. Why? Because that's the main thing the author is trying to sell. The idea that these movies are thoughtful and profound. Okay, if you have problems finding the conclusion, then go back to the earlier sections. Okay, go back to the earlier sections. You need to practice more, because by this time it should be easy for us to identify main conclusions. All right, and yes, because by this time it should be easy for us to identify main conclusions. And if you're doing assumptions questions, identifying the main conclusion is essential. Okay, now, so they are in fact thoughtful and profound. So we can kind of build a little bit of an equation here, like quant, right? An equation. You say Marvel movies equal to thoughtful and profound films. Okay. Now I'm gonna look for another part, another premise, another fact in which they make another equation that contains either Marvel movies or thoughtful, profound films. So right now I have A is equal to B. I want to find something like A is equal to C, so I can make the link between B and C. Okay, since they present philosophical themes. Now I got it here. Marvel movies, they, right? Marvel movies is they equal present philosophical themes. Okay, so I already have my assumption. Anything that presents philosophical themes would be a thoughtful and profound film. So I already have my assumption here. Any movie that presents philosophical themes will be a thoughtful and profound film. So just because it is giving away or talking about philosophical themes, that makes that movie a thoughtful and profound film. That's what the author is assuming. And now let's go to the first one. If a movie discusses complex problems, then it is a thoughtful and profound movie. Okay, that's close. That's close, but not quite. Why? Because a movie discusses complex problems, and that's not what they were assuming, right? They are assuming that if a movie, what makes a movie thoughtful and profound, it's not the complexity of the problems, it's the presentation of philosophical themes. And that's here, right? Since that explanation, since they present philosophical themes, then they are in fact thoughtful and profound films. So the complex problems come at the end. That's one example, but that's not the main thing. That's not what makes this movie thoughtful and profound. Close, but not the answer. Let B. Since Marvel movies deal with philosophical themes, they will be entertaining. Okay, you have something about philosophical themes, but then this letter B talks about entertaining, and that's not what they're talking about. The author is not even going into whether it is entertaining or not. So that's how. Letter C. Any movie that doesn't deal with the ontology or utilitarianism is not a thoughtful and profound film. Okay. This one contains a logical mistake, a flaw. Why? Because the ontology and utilitarianism, they were given as what? As examples here. Examples of what? Examples of philosophical themes, right? But an example is just that. It's an example. I mean, it doesn't mean that the ontology and utilitarianism are the only ones, the only types of philosophical themes. Those are examples. So even if the Marvel movies or any other movie doesn't have these two particular themes, doesn't talk about the ontology or utilitarianism, they could still talk about some other topics that qualify as philosophical themes. So these examples are not exclusive, right? Now, letter D. Any film that presents philosophical themes is a thoughtful movie. That's what we have here. So that's the answer. Okay? So that you see the link, right? Because of scenes, they say they are thoughtful. Why? Because they present philosophical themes. So at the time a movie presents a philosophical theme, then it becomes a thoughtful movie. Okay. Letter E. Since Marvel movies solve ethical problems, they employ philosophical techniques. First of all, we have philosophical techniques, and we never talked about them. The author never talked about them. The author referred to philosophical themes, not techniques. And then also, they are inverting the logic, right? They solve ethical problems, and because they solve ethical problems, they employ philosophical. No, the ethical problems were given as an example of the philosophical themes. It has nothing to do with the philosophical techniques, and definitely it's not the cause for the employment or the use of philosophical techniques. Okay, so that's out. Now you can see definitely this one is a kind of easier question for an assumption. It's an intermediate one, but you can definitely see the difference between this kind of exercises and the exercises we were seeing and we were solving earlier on in the strengthening and weakening section. Okay, on that section we had easier exercises because assumptions is a tricky topic. Okay. So now let's go to the next one. So here we've got question number 10. Okay, again, you have 2 minutes. Try to do this. Okay, 2 minutes. This one is an intermediate question, and then we're gonna go over this question together. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, start. Okay, so now by this time you should be done. Now again, don't forget to download our free PDF file called Liberty Challenge Volume 1. You'll get 100 free high quality exercises with video explanation. Don't miss out on that because now you're starting to understand, I'm sure, that you need a lot of practice material, okay? Because these concepts, you need to apply them over and over, so you need a lot of exercises to work with. And you have to make sure that you get some quality exercises. So now let's read this one. It says, in Wakanda, the amount of vibranium retrieved every year is just large enough to satisfy the demand for its national weapons industry. Okay, so the Wakandians are doing something with weapons, okay? Wakanda's mining productivity will not increase in the foreseeable future, nor will new vibranium mines be discovered. Wakanda's weapons industry, however, will be increasing significantly as new companies enter the market. Clearly, Wakanda will soon need to import vibranium. Okay, so here we need to do some kind of pre-thinking. We already know the question is about the assumption. So let's say, okay, you have Wakanda, right? Wakanda. That's a fictional country, right? And they have this vibranium, which is apparently a metal, right, that they mine. Okay, so they say, right now the production of vibranium is just large enough to satisfy its weapons industry. So just large enough. So they don't have an oversupply or an overstock of vibranium, just large enough. They basically, they spend all the vibranium they retrieve, okay? Now they say the productivity in the mines will not increase. Productivity in the mines, the vibranium mines, will be flat, the same, okay? It could be lower, but not higher. Nor will new vibranium mines be discovered, and you won't get new mines, not new mines. All of this is telling us what? If your productivity is going to be flat, it's not going to increase, and you are not going to get new mines, most likely they are giving you an argument that the quantity of vibranium is going to either remain stable or go down, but it's not going to increase, okay? They haven't said that, but that's part of the argument. That they gave you evidence in order to say that. Then, Wakanda's weapons industry, however, will be increasing significantly. But then the people who, or the industry that consumes this vibranium, which is the weapons industry, will need more, apparently. It will be increasing significantly as new companies enter the market. So you will have more companies, more people, or more entities, or more companies that will need vibranium. And there's a link here. There's a link, and because of that, Wakanda will need to import. So the production is going to be the same. It will not increase, and you'll get more companies. And because of that, you're going to import. There are several flaws here, several things that would make that false. And we have to, in our pre-thinking, we have to try to weaken this, right? For example, I could imagine that these companies will switch from vibranium to something else. If these companies switch from vibranium to some other metal, then they will need to produce more metal, and neither will they need to import vibranium, right? Something like that. So you have to be thinking about those things before you start answering. But now let's go and answer to show you how we're going to work with the negation technique. So, no new technologies to economize vibranium will be implemented by weapon manufacturers in Wakanda. Okay? So, this one is an assumption. I kind of like it. Why? Because they talk about something. Technologies to economize vibranium. So they say, if these companies implement technologies to economize it, it means that they will need less vibranium to make the same amount of weapons for the same output, for the same production of weapons they have right now. So now, how do we test whether this one is the actual conclusion? We invert it. In the case of this one, we're going to invert it by changing the quantity word. No is an extreme word, so we're going to change it. And we're going to say some. So some new technology, and this one, when we invert it, it should be what? If you've been following, it should be a weaken, right? When you invert, because the assumption is necessary, when you invert the assumption, you generate a weakening premise. So some new technologies to economize vibranium will be implemented by weapon manufacturers in Wakanda. Will that be a weakening? Yes. So that's the answer. Why? The argument basically said the quantity of vibranium, the amount of vibranium we extract from the mines, is going to be the same or less. And you have more companies building or making weapons. Okay? And therefore you will need more vibranium and will need to import it. All right. But then with letter A, you're saying, if you invert it, you say, but these companies will need less vibranium per capita, could need less vibranium because there are some new technologies that allow them to economize vibranium. So the total demand, internal demand for these companies for vibranium might not increase. And if it doesn't increase, then there would be no need to import vibranium, okay? So that would be the logic here. So that was the answer. Letter B. Not all vibranium currently mined out is of industrial grade. Now this one's out of scope, okay? Because here in the argument, it never talked about vibranium, the grades of vibranium. We don't even know if, of course, we can assume that these weapon manufacturers use vibranium of industrial grade because that they are industry, right? But still, we don't know how much of the vibranium before and after has been of industrial grade and how much hasn't been. So there is no way for us to know if that's the case, or that's out, Okay, that has nothing to do with the assumption here or with the conclusion. Now, let's see. None of the vibranium mines in Wakanda are exceptionally high yielding. Okay, if none, let's try to change it. Some. Okay, some of the vibranium mines, we're inverting it to see if it weakens. Some of the vibranium mines in Wakanda are exceptionally high yielding. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because they already said something. We shouldn't contradict a fact. And what are the facts? The productivity in the mines is going to be the same or less. That's already. So it doesn't matter if there's one mine or a couple mines that are exceptionally high yielding. The total productivity of the mines is going to remain stable or be less. And there will be no new mines. So those are facts. We cannot contradict them. So letter C has nothing to do. We don't care about one particular mine. We care about the total production from the mines. Okay? Now, letter D. There are no other industries in Wakanda that will not increase. Why would it matter though? Because first of all, we don't have information whether those industries will require vibranium or not. It could be the food industry, and the food industry doesn't really require the vibranium, right? And here we're not talking about any other industries. We're only talking about these companies that manufacture weapons. So that's not good. Letter E. There are no other major metals in Wakanda for which the supply and the demand are currently in balance. Okay, other metals, so other things other than vibranium, other metals. So metals other than vibranium. Okay, we don't care about them because this whole argument, if you've noticed, is about vibranium, not about other things. Now, this one could be a little bit more attractive if they start saying that these other major metals are maybe substitutes for vibranium. But letter E doesn't say that, okay? So that's how to, and our answer is letter A, the first one. Okay, so this one's being a good assumption, letter A. Okay, now let's go to the next one. So here you have 2 minutes, as usual. Okay, let's start. So now let's read this together. Last year, all the garbage collected in Capsule City, okay, was incinerated, generating a large amount of ash. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Capsule City is a fictional city in Dragon Ball. Okay, now this year, the mayor of Capsule City has announced that they are improving the city's waste management process with the ultimate goal of reducing by 1/2 the total amount of ash that results from the burning of waste. This year, several recycling programs will be implemented so that the final number of truckloads of garbage is only 50% of last year's number. So what is Now notice the question, right? Which of the following is required for Kansas City to achieve its goal? Right, so we're in front of a plan that gets to a goal, right? What is required? Basically, they're saying, out of these ones, which one's necessary for the conclusion, for the goal to work, okay? So that's a thing here, okay? Now notice that here, there's a little change. So I say, what is the plan here? The plan would be to reduce by 1/2 the number of truckloads of garbage, okay? And what is the goal? The goal would be to reduce by 1/2 the amount of ash. So that's the thing. Now, we would need that thing to happen, right? Something that would tell us that by reducing to 1/2 the number of truckloads, we would be able to reduce by 1/2 the amount of ash, okay? Because that's not necessarily correlated, okay? Most likely it is, but not necessarily. So when you think about assumptions, you should always think about the contingencies, about things that would make this not work, about weakening reasons to weaken, right? Weakening facts. So let's see. The first one, this year, all materials that could be separated from recycling will be incinerated. Okay, so they say this year, what they're going to do is they're going to separate things to recycle, right? And what's left over, the leftovers will be incinerated. Okay, but what does that have to do with 1/2? What does it tell me about the relationship between decreasing by 1/2 the number of truckloads and obtaining 1/2 less, or decreasing by 1/2 the amount of ash? It doesn't tell us anything about it, so that was out of scope. Okay, we don't even know what percentage or what fraction are the things that are being recycled. That's out. Number 2, garbage collected and incinerated this year will not generate more ash per truckload than last year. Okay, that one looks attractive. Why? Because it talks about the truckloads, and the truckloads, as you know, are the plan, right? And also because it talks about incineration, and incineration is directly correlated to ash. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to negate it to see if by negating we can achieve, we can weaken this whole thing. So garbage collected and incinerated this year will generate more ash per truckload than last year. Okay, what would happen then? If you have every truckload of garbage will generate more ash than last year, then if you reduce by 1/2 the number of truckloads, you will not be able to reduce by 1/2 the amount of ash. That would be true for the, let's say, rate of ash per truckload of last year. So let's say last year, you had a total. Let me graph this out, okay? You had 2 trucks. Each truckload, when it was burned, generated, let's say you have truckload number 1, A, let's say truckload number 2, B. When you burn the contents of the truckloads, you generated 100 pounds, let's say, of ash, right? 100. That was last year, okay? So by having 2 truckloads, you had 200 pounds of ash. Now what they're planning to do is to reduce that to 1/2. So now you have only 1 truck, okay? And they want to reduce the number of, the amount of ash by 1/2 to 100. But let's say now you have only 1 truck, but that truck generates more ash per truck than last year. So now it doesn't generate 100, let's say it generates 120. So at the end, you won't have reduced by 1/2 the amount of ash, okay? So letter B is our answer. Beautiful. You see how the GMAT works. Now let us see. Garbage collected this year will contain a larger amount of biodegradable material than last year. Now, if that's true, though, I mean, they're adding something else, a new factor, the biodegradable material. It doesn't convince me, but what I do know, though, is that if something is biodegradable, it's better for the environment, apparently, right? So, I mean, you don't have to burn it too much because it kind of just goes away on its own. So if that happens, that would help. But that's not necessary, though. Why? Because remember, the assumption is not only something that strengthens, but something that's necessary. So if we go here and we weaken this, will not. So you have garbage collected this year will not contain a larger amount of biodegradable material. Would that weaken the conclusion? I mean, is this biodegradable material necessary? No, not at all, okay? So that's out, not necessary. Letter D, separated material that will be incinerated from those or from that material that will be recycled will not cost Capsule City more than 50% of the cost of last year. Now here we're talking about cost, money necessary for the city, for Capsule City, to implement this program. But the conclusion here is not focused on the cost. It's focused on the goal. What is the goal here? To reduce by 1/2 the amount of ash. So this letter D is out of scope because it talks about, it's focused on the cost of monetary issues, and that's not the focus of the argument. Letter E, the total amount of garbage collected this year will be less than 1/2 of that amount of garbage collected last year. Okay, so it will be less than 1/2, the amount of garbage. Okay, but that's not the plan though. What was the plan? The plan wasn't to collect less garbage. The plan was to reduce to 1/2 the number of trucks, or of truckloads, actually. Okay, so this one doesn't tell us if that number, we're gonna be able to reduce by 1/2 the number of truckloads. Now, they could have said the total amount of garbage collected this year will be 1/2. Yeah, that would be something like a repetition of a premise. That would be repeating a premise though. A premise. If here we say, or we assume that this amount of garbage will be 1/2 less, right, decreased by 1/2, that would be the same thing as saying that the plan, right, we're going to decrease the number of truckloads to 1/2. The same thing. So it doesn't offer anything new. And if it doesn't offer anything new, then that can be the answer. That's not the answer, because the answer must be something new, right? Something that supports the argument, something that links the facts to the main conclusion, okay? So the answer here is B. Now you've seen that this is a little bit more advanced, okay? So if you're having a lot of trouble with following me here in the assumptions, it only means one thing. You need to go back to strengthening and weakening, do more exercises, download our free PDF file, Liberty Challenge Volume 1, and you'll have tons of exercises to practice with, okay? But you need to practice more before you come to the assumptions, okay? Don't worry, because the assumptions actually is one of the hardest types of exercises you'll see on the GMAT overall, okay? And it just takes time and patience, okay? Just do exercises over and over, but before you start dealing with assumptions, you have to make sure that you totally understand, that you're totally cool with strengthening and weakening. All right, that's my best advice. So we just finished the assumptions lesson. If you're liking this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, okay? And subscribe to the channel. Assumptions is tricky, okay? If this lesson was difficult for you, it's only because of one thing, because you don't really have mastered strengthening and weakening, because as I've been saying in the lesson, okay, strengthening and weakening is the base for assumptions. So assumptions could be taken as a subtype of strengthening questions. They are basically the same thing with a little change, all right? That change is that they are necessary, okay? But of course, you first have to use all your theory for strengthening and weakening, and then make the little change. Make sure that they are necessary. If you don't know your theory for strengthening and weakening, then you're going to have trouble solving assumptions. Good thing is this lesson is free for you to play over and over, so just go back to that section for strengthening and weakening until you get it down, okay? But now, if you are okay with that, now let's move on to the final chapter, which is the boldface question. So here we get to chapter number 5, the boldface. Okay, the boldface type of question is a minor question, so it doesn't come too often, but whenever it comes, whenever the GMAT throws a boldface question at you, it's usually kind of difficult. Okay, most people get them wrong. Now, I will teach you here a methodology, a series of steps for you to apply, and if you apply them, these boldfaces are going to seem easy. So after watching this lesson, you should be able to do these boldfaces very easily. So the first thing, you have to get the method, right? Getting the method. Boldface type questions will introduce arguments with 1 or 2 statements in bold. The question will ask you to identify the roles that those statements are playing in the argument. Okay, so Basically, they will give an argument such as this one, okay? And they will have a couple of those statements, usually 2 of them, in boldface. So here we have boldface number 1, there's this sentence here, this part of the sentence, and boldface number 2 after however, right? So that's what you have, that's what you get. They're gonna ask you about the role that those 2 pieces of information, those 2 phrases are playing inside the argument, okay? So that's the thing. So here we have our 5 steps. These are the 5 steps we are going to be using, okay? So the first thing you want to do is step number 1. Step number 1 is identify the main conclusion. Whenever you read a boldface argument, the most important thing is for you to identify the main conclusion. Now, by this time, we're doing chapter 5 now, right? So by this time, it should be very easy for you to identify main conclusions. Right? That's something we learned on the introduction, right? In chapter number 1. So that should be easy. We should have absolutely no problems with it, okay? So that's the first thing you do. You identify the main conclusion for that argument. Step number 2. You identify whether the boldface number 1, the first boldface, that's, let's say we have boldface here and boldface here, is boldface number 1, is boldface number 2. So bold 1 and bold 2. If bold 1 is a fact or a claim, that's very important for us to know what it is, right? So a fact and claim, we know what a fact is and we know what a claim is an opinion, right? Opinion. That's a difference that we should be very familiar with, all right? We should be totally familiarized with this difference. And that's something we also went over on the introduction. So if you're still having trouble with this, go back to the introduction, okay? This lesson is free, so you can watch it over and over until you get it down. So you first have to decide whether this step number 2, whether boldface number 1, the first bold, is a fact or an opinion. And then what do you do is step number 3. You have to check whether bold number 1 supports or weakens the main conclusion. Remember, in step number 1, you already identified the main conclusion, so you have to see the relationship between bold number 1 and the main conclusion. If it's a positive relationship or a negative one. If it supports it or if it weakens it, okay? So that's the thing. And then you do the same thing for bold number 2. So in step number 4, you're going to identify whether bold number 2 is a fact or a claim. And in step number 5, you're going to identify whether bold number 2 supports or weakens the main conclusion. Once you have that information, you are ready to give your answer. You are ready to eliminate several answer choices in order to get your answer. So let's see this one. Read this argument here. I'll give you 20 seconds. Okay. Even better, I'm gonna read it with you, and then we're gonna go over the 5 steps. So let's see. All superheroes have superpowers, which amaze average people in many ways. However, Peter is definitely not a superhero. Rather, he's a vigilante that executes his victims without any responsible measure, such as a trial, and violates constitutional rights. So Peter is like a vigilante, okay? He executes the victims directly, right? He doesn't believe in the law, let's say that. What is the main conclusion here? It should be very easy for us to identify the main conclusion. The main opinion. What is the idea the author is trying to sell? Okay, the main idea is here. Peter is definitely not a superhero. That's the main conclusion, okay? So boldface number 2 ends up being the main conclusion, and that's going to make our job much easier because we already know boldface number 2, the second bold, is the main conclusion. So that's step number 1, identify the main conclusion. Step number 2, we have to check whether bold number 1 is a fact or a claim or an opinion. In this case, it says all superheroes have superpowers. What does it sound like? It's like a fact, okay? It's a fact. So bold number 1 is a fact. Okay, and what's a relationship between this fact and the main conclusion? It's a negative relationship, right? Because Peter has superpowers, but he is not a superhero. So basically the author is trying to say, hey, wait, it's true that all superheroes have superpowers. A superpower would make someone a superhero, but in this case there's an exception. Okay, there's an exception. Why? Because you have a guy, Peter Parker, right? He's got superpowers, but he is not a superhero because he is a vigilante. Basically, that's what they're saying, okay? So that's with the first bolt. What about step number 3? We do the same thing for the second. That was step number 2 and 3, I'm sorry. Now step number 4, we do the same thing for the second bolt. But with the second bolt, our job is much easier because we already know that's the main conclusion. So if it's a main conclusion, it means it is an opinion, right? Because only opinions could be conclusions. And that's also positive to itself, all right? What's the relationship to the main conclusion? The relationship is that it is the main conclusion. So there's no other relationship there. So that should be enough for us to start answering among the answer choices, okay? So one important thing we have to go over here in the boldface is that the terminology tends to be very dense, okay? There is a lot of terminology, a lot of different synonyms for the words. So here we have outlined the 2 main types of statements that we have. One is the fact, right? The other one is the opinion. We already went over this in chapter number 1. Okay, in order for us to have a fact, okay, the fact could receive several other types of names, right? They could call it a premise, they could call it evidence, observation, state of affairs, context, finding, circumstance. Those are a lot of synonyms for the same word, which is fact. Of course, there is some minor differences among these ones, but basically they're all facts. They are all true. Okay, they're all true. Those are things that have happened or are true. Now, the claim is the opinion, of course. Other synonyms for the word opinion are going to be judgment, conclusion, contention, position, inference, prediction, intermediate conclusion. Okay, those are keywords for an opinion. So that's it. Be careful with the terminology. Make sure you know your synonyms. And now we're going to start with the practice. Okay, so we're going to do this number 6. Of course, we have 2 minutes to do it. And then we're going to go over the answers. So 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, so this one says, last year there was a record number of velociraptors born in Jurassic Park. Okay. A velociraptor can be born both on site through natural procreation and selection or in the laboratory with the help of genetic manipulation. The reports from the park watchers this year, however, indicate that the rate of dinosaur births in the field has decreased. At the same time, there is strong evidence that geneticists working in the labs will not work more hours this year than last year. And surely geneticists working this year will not help produce more velociraptors per capita than they did last year. Therefore, it is easy to conclude that the number of velociraptors born this year will be less than last year's record. So the question is always the same with the boldface, right? What are those two statements? What roles do they have inside the argument? So let's go through the steps. Main conclusion. What is the main conclusion? The main conclusion is therefore blah 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 blah. This boldface number 2 is the main conclusion. Step number 2 and 3. Let's identify bold number 1 and check whether that's a fact or an opinion, and if it is, it strengthens or it weakens the conclusion. Boldface number 1 says surely geneticists will not help produce more velociraptors. This is something in the future. This is surely, but something that's going to happen in the future. Therefore, that's an opinion. Okay, opinion that goes with the conclusion. So it is basically a basis in order for this author to say, to conclude something, right? So that's a positive relationship. And boldface number 2, of course, we already know that's the main conclusion. So we have enough info to start eliminating some answer choices. The first, a prediction. Prediction is another word for opinion, conclusion, claim, so that's fine. Prediction. The first thing, objection. Objection is something that has a negative relationship. And here we have nothing with a negative relationship. So objection is out. Okay. The first, a claim, that could be. Let's go to the second part. The second is a conclusion drawn in order to support that main conclusion. False. Why? Because the second is the main conclusion. It is not supporting anything else. The second one, being the main conclusion, receives all the support. The main conclusion does not support anything else. It just receives support. So this is false. Okay, the second is not supporting anything. Letter B, the second is that main conclusion. Fine, that's the answer. Okay, B is our answer. Letter E, the second is a claim advanced in support of the main conclusion. The same thing as in A. It is not supporting anything. So B here. Okay, so this is fairly easy if you know how to work through it. If you follow the 5 steps, basically. Okay, let's go with the second one. 3, 2, 1. You have 2 minutes. Let's go. Okay, so here we have journal. A surgical procedure is deemed necessary only after the patient has submitted all the medical examinations to the medical board for review. A government efficiency expert has observed that virtually all files submitted for review in the last decade have been approved. The expert has consequently recommended that because government funds are largely wasted in the reviewing process, the medical board should be disassembled. Wow. This recommendation, nevertheless, should be rejected as preposterous, since there is no assurance that the requirements for a necessary procedure will continue to be met after the board is taken apart. Okay, so step number 1, main conclusion. What is the main conclusion? The main conclusion is this recommendation should be rejected as preposterous. That's your main conclusion, okay? If you don't know how to identify it, go back to your introduction. There is another conclusion. Yes, the board should be disassembled, but remember, that's not the main conclusion. That's not the opinion from the journal. That's the opinion from those experts, okay? The journal believes that the recommendation given by the experts should be rejected. So that's our main conclusion. Now, steps number 2 and 3. Bold number 1. Is it a fact or an opinion? Virtually all files submitted for review have been, that's something in the past tense. Therefore, it's a fact. And then, positive or negative relationship with the conclusion. Actually, that's kind of a negative relationship. Why? Because it is being used, this bold number 1 is being used to support the medical board's suggestion, recommendation, you see? So it has a negative relationship to the conclusion, because we know that between the recommendation by the medical board and the journal's opinion, there is a negative relationship. So if something is being used to support a point of view that is opposite to the main conclusion, then it has a negative relationship to the main conclusion, okay? That's bold number 1. Bold number 2, fact or opinion. Bold number 2, because blah, 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 blah. Because is a keyword for a fact, okay? We said that on the introduction. We said that in the introduction. And then positive or negative, of course, negative, okay? So that's it. 2 facts with negative relationship with the conclusion. Let's see. The first an observation, that could be the first finding, that could be the first a claim. No, because the first is a fact. Finding could be conclusion. No, because it's a fact. Conclusion and claim are keywords for synonyms of opinion. Okay. Then we have 3. We're left with 3. Then we go to the second half. The second is a conclusion. The second one is not a conclusion. It's also fact. Could it be a judgment? It might be a judgment. So let's leave it there. So it's like a consideration, okay? Now, letter D, the second is the main conclusion, and it's not a conclusion, so letter B is the answer. Very quickly, okay? The first finding was in support of the proposal that the journal opposes. Yes, the first one is a finding that is being used by the recommendation given by the medical board. The second is a judgment that was based on that proposal and was used to support, it's another thing they used to support the proposal, you see? So letter B here. Okay, the second one. Good. So far, we are doing okay. Let's now go to the last one. Number 10, we've got 2 minutes. 3, 2, 1, you can start. So in countries where standard medical insurance includes psychiatric treatment, the use of antidepressants is twice as much as in countries where psychiatric treatment is not included as part of standard medical insurance. Currently, it is not possible to know with certainty whether patients who are prescribed antidepressants really need them. However, these facts do not warrant the conclusion drawn by some critics that in the countries with the highest rate of consumption of antidepressants, half of the people who received a prescription didn't really need them. Clearly, in countries where standard medical insurance doesn't include psychiatric treatment, people often forego on the treatment and hence are not prescribed antidepressants even when they need them. Okay, so main conclusion. Main conclusion is this one here. These facts do not warrant a conclusion. So why is this author writing this? In order to say that the conclusion given by some critics is false or wrong or unsound. Okay, so these facts do not warrant the conclusion is the main conclusion. You would be asking, oh, but clearly it's a keyword for an opinion. Yes, it is. So this one, Boldface number 2, is in fact an opinion. It is a conclusion, but it is not the main conclusion. Why? Because it is being used to support the main conclusion from the author, which is that some critics are mistaken. Okay, so main conclusion, we already have it. Boldface number 1, fact or opinion. In countries where blah 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 blah, the use of antidepressants is twice. That's data, right? Data usually is a fact. Now, is it positive or negative to the main conclusion? It's not totally negative, but it's not positive either. Why? Because it's being used by the critics. The critics are using this statement at the beginning and they are saying something. They are concluding something because of it. And then the argument, the author of this argument is going against it. Okay. Then bold number two is of course an opinion because of clarity, and it is positive to the main conclusion because the author is using this last sentence in order to support the fact that the critics were mistaken. Okay, so that's how we do, and then we start eliminating. The first is a claim, false. First a finding, that could be. The first evidence, that could be. The first finding, yes. Claim, no. So very easily we have eliminated 2. And then let's go to the last part. The second is that conclusion. Second is a conclusion, it could be. It is an opinion. Opinion would be a conclusion. We know that the second one is not the main conclusion, but it is a conclusion. So let's just leave it. Then the second is evidence. No, the second one is not evidence. The second is the main conclusion. No, it is not the main conclusion. Okay. The second is a claim. Yeah, it is a claim. So we know that D must be the answer. Okay. So that's how we do this. It's very easy once you have the 5 steps down. Don't rush. Just go step by step until you get it down and you are totally comfortable applying this. So that's been the boldface. The boldface is a tricky type of question. It doesn't come too much. I mean, it's not too common on the GMAT, but once you get it, once you see a boldface, if you don't apply this theory, it's going to be very difficult for you to get the answer. Okay, that's why most boldfaces are considered either intermediate or hard. And if you've been watching us so far, the whole course, and you watch an introduction like you are supposed to, you know that if you answer these intermediate and hard questions correctly, on top of the easy questions, that's how you get your 700. That's how you get the really high score. Perfect, so this has been the complete course for the critical reasoning section of the GMAT exam. If you like this video, I invite you again to subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell. All right, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment if you want to. We'll try to answer as soon as we can. And also, don't forget to follow us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. By the way, we're offering very inexpensive tutoring services for both the GMAT and the TOEFL. Okay, so if you need preparation for any of those exams, we are the place to go. We are blessed to have students from all over the world. Our contact information is here and also in the description below. And of course, this is our website where you can go and see all of our services. This has been the lesson for critical reasoning. Next lesson coming up is reading comprehension. Okay, just make sure you click on that notification bell to you receive the updates when we upload the new video. My name is Rod. I'm with Liberty Test Prep, and I'll see you then. Keep on practicing.